1,200,000 copper coins. Skonard stared at Mag with incredulity etched on his face. His voice spiked a few octaves as he exclaimed, "Are you delusional? Do you think this is Dukas restaurant that you're running here?" Skonard had thought that it would cost him 20,000 copper coins at most. That was almost half of his spending money for the month, but if he could win Vivian's heart, then the price would be well worth it. However, Mag was asking for 1,200,000 copper coins. That was absolutely insane, and he was stipulating that cash had to be used. Who would carry over 1,000,000 copper coins with them to a restaurant? All of the customers in the restaurant were also a little stunned. Business was booming for the restaurant, and they charged high prices as well, so everyone could deduce that their daily revenue was quite high. No one had done any specific calculations, but from Mag's words, it sounded like they were making close to 500,000 per day. Among all of the restaurants in the Aden Square, even the first-ranked Dukas restaurant might not be able to compare to that. That's already a discounted price. Mag shrugged with a smile. Besides, even if you have the money, the restaurant isn't available for reservation anyway. A collective burst of laughter erupted in the restaurant. All of the customers were in a slightly foul mood from Skonard's cocky declaration, but their spirits had been lifted again. In terms of flexing, Mag was far superior to Skonard. "Your daddy will always be your daddy." Those words couldn't ring any truer. Pfft! Vivian almost burst into laughter upon hearing that. The boss here really was an interesting man. He wasn't using any vulgar words, but his insults were all the more scathing for it. However, she immediately discovered that she shouldn't be chuckling under her breath. As such, she burst into raucous laughter, venting all of her frustration with Skonard in the process. "You!" Skonard's face immediately became flushed with rage. He was extremely infuriated upon hearing the customers' laughter, and when Vivian joined in, he wanted to dig a hole in the ground and bury himself. He was trying to take advantage of this opportunity to show off his charisma and gentlemanly side, but he had been reduced to a laughingstock. He had lived in Chaos City for 2 years, and it was the first time that he had ever been humiliated like this. Mag handed a menu to Skonard, and suggested earnestly, "You can have a look at the menu first. You may not be able to reserve the whole restaurant, but you can have one of every dish like you declared earlier if you want. As for the spicy grilled fish, I think the insanely spicy level will suit you. Let me see what you're selling to deserve 1,200,000 copper coins." Skonard wrenched the menu from Mag's hand, and flipped it open with an enraged expression. His eyes then immediately widened, and he brought the menu closer to his face as he asked, "Are these prices correct?" Skonard often visited high-end restaurants, so he was used to seeing a few expensive signature dishes here and there. However, the cheapest item on this menu was the tofu pudding, which cost 200 copper coins, while the braised chicken and rice cost 800. As for the most expensive spicy grilled fish, the smallest portion cost 1,200 copper coins, and the largest was labeled at 2,000. The top-ranked Dukas restaurant on the Aden Square food competition rankings sold a whole roast lamb for 2,500 copper coins, but that was enough for 6 people. Furthermore, they supplied free drinks with each order of the whole roast lamb, and they were still able to claim the top spot with that price. But in this restaurant, which wasn't even on the rankings board, they were charging 2,000 copper coins for a grilled fish. Surely even the largest grilled fish could only be enough for 4 people at most. Those are the correct prices. Every customer pays the same price, and I've never received any complaints. Mag shook his head with a smile. These prices. Vivian opened her menu, and a hint of surprise also appeared on her face at the sight of the prices being charged here. She contemplated momentarily before nodding and thinking to herself, if the food really is as delicious as Uncle Robert says, then this isn't expensive. However, with so many customers and such high prices, even if all of the customers only order the cheapest tofu pudding, their earnings would still be extremely high. They could easily rank as one of the top restaurants in the Aden Square based on daily earnings. It's really difficult to believe that this is a restaurant that has only been running for less than a month. If they can continue to expand, then it wouldn't be difficult at all for them to overtake Dukas restaurant for the top spot. Vivian looked up at Meg with an intrigued expression. Not only had this man spoiled this month's Aden Square food competition rankings, it wouldn't be long before he tipped the entire restaurant industry in the Aden Square on its head. Is his food really that good? I have to taste it for myself. I'd like a spicy grilled fish with medium spice level and a sweet tofu pudding. Vivian closed the menu, and looked at Meg with a serious expression as she said, I hope your dishes can live up to their hefty prices. My target is to always make the taste of my dishes live up to their monetary value. I'm sure you'll be satisfied. Mag smiled at Vivian, and his eyes lingered on her neck for a moment before he averted his gaze and turned away. Skonard was clearly trying to show off to this handsome young man by trying to reserve the restaurant, and Mag initially had also thought that Skonard's sexual orientation was a little off. However, it appeared that this was actually a young woman. She either had an A-cup chest or had bound her chest with some strapping, and her cover had most likely already been seen through by Skonard. Has he noticed? A hint of caution welled up in Vivian's heart. I'll also take a spicy grilled fish, the largest one you have. As for the spice level, Skonard turned to Mag. He didn't have 1,200,000 copper coins in cash, and even if he did, he wouldn't spend it just to reserve the restaurant for a night. Furthermore, Mag wasn't going to let him reserve the restaurant even if he had the money, and if he were to keep bickering over that, it would only make appear barbaric in Vivian's eyes. He had already failed in his first attempt to flex, so he had to limit the damage. Even though he didn't normally eat a lot of spicy food, he wasn't going to back down in front of Vivian. Thus, he gritted his teeth, and said, I want the insanely spicy level. All right, I'll have your orders ready soon. Mag smiled as he turned toward the kitchen. The reason why the insanely spicy level was referred to as such was because it was simply not something a normal person could handle. Skonard was going to pay a heavy price for trying to show off in front of a woman. Even Mag couldn't help but observe a minute of silence for his digestive system and his shoal. Even though he liked spicy food, he was still not insane enough to try the insanely spicy level. Yabimiya heaved an internal sigh of relief, and went on to serve the next customer. It seemed that no matter what troubles were thrown at them, Mag could always resolve them with composure and efficiency. All of the customers also began to focus on their meals. With Mag as the boss of the restaurant, they didn't have to worry about getting evicted, as he was a man of righteousness. Skonard looked at Vivian with a smile, and asked, May I sit here, brother? System, just the medium spice level is inducing wardrobe malfunctions, will the insanely spicy level make the customer explode? Mag was a little concerned. The spicy grilled fish was heavily endorsed by the customers following its release, but most of them chose the mildly spicy and medium spice levels. Urian was the only one who had asked for the super spicy level, and after taking his first bite, a vast expanse of water vapor rose from his body, making the restaurant appear as if it were a concert venue with dry ice wafting everywhere. As for the insanely spicy level, that was the first order of its kind. Please do not doubt the safety standards of the food provided by the system. The system's serious voice sounded, and it launched a long spiel. All of the spicy grilled fish ingredients were carefully chosen by the system. The rainbow fish combines the best qualities from both grass carp and Crocean croakers. It's very high in protein, and also contains traces of elemental selenium, which possesses anti-aging and nourishing properties. The Tabasquin pepper derives from crossbreeding Tabasco and Pekin peppers of the highest quality, and was grown on the Poison Fire Island of the Demon Islands. They're baked by toxic flame daily, filtering out all impurities, and are imbued with the thermal energy contained within those flames, so they're extremely useful for combating the cold. The wild ice heart pepper was planted in the extreme north of the Roth Empire, giving it a hint of refreshing coolness to complement its spicy taste. When used in conjunction with the Tobas Quin pepper, it can effectively nullify the fiery energy within the latter, preventing it from harming the consumer's body. So that's why the ingredients cost me 600 copper coins just for a small portion. Mag pursed his lips upon hearing the system. Your prices are set at least twice the cost of the ingredients, so I'm sure the more the ingredients cost, the happier you are, the system's disdainful voice sounded. Who told you that? My wish is to bring the best food to everyone for cheap prices, but life is too difficult, so I can only set prices this high, Mag responded in a serious voice. He then placed 2 marinated fish into the oven, and continued to work on making braised chicken and rice. Father, Ugly Duckling ate all my fish bones. Can I beat it up? At that moment, Amy appeared in the entrance of the kitchen with a grumpy expression. She held a box in one hand and Ugly Duckling by the scruff of its neck in her other hand. Mag turned around upon hearing her complaints. The box that she was holding housed the skeleton of the fish that they had consumed for lunch, but almost all of the bones were gone, and the rest were in complete disarray. Meow! Ugly Duckling was being held by the scruff of its neck, and it cried to Mag for help. However, it was looking quite guilty, which indicated that it was indeed the one who had messed up the fish bones. All right, you can teach it a lesson. Mag shook his head with a resigned smile at the sight of the ruined fish bones. He had spent quite a bit of time washing and organizing the bones before carefully attaching them together using thread and needle, so he was a little frustrated that Ugly Duckling had ruined the fruits of his labor. Meow! Ugly Duckling was hoping that Mag would save it, but he had already turned around, abandoning it. All right. After receiving Mag's permission, Amy nodded with a solemn expression. She set the box in her hand aside before placing Ugly Duckling onto a stool, and scrunched up its chubby face in her little hands. She interrogated, Ugly Duckling, do you know what you did wrong? Meow! Ugly Duckling hurriedly nodded with a pitiable expression in its sapphire eyes. What did you do wrong? Amy asked. Ugly Duckling turned, and pointed at the box of fish bones with its paw as a hint of desire flashed through its eyes. Do you feel like you did me a favor by leaving some? Amy twisted its face back so she could look into its eyes. Meow! Ugly Duckling nodded unconsciously before immediately shaking its head. Ugly Duckling! How could you? Amy was a little angry as she squished Ugly Duckling's face with her little hands. What a smart little kitty, and what an adorable half-elf girl! Vivian's eyes immediately lit up at the sight of Amy and Ugly Duckling. Her gaze then rested on Amy. She was most likely the half-elf girl that Luna often mentioned. Even though they're very adorable, I definitely don't have the urge to hug them or anything. I hate annoying little kids and stuff. Vivian quickly averted her gaze. The customers also looked at their adorable interaction with benevolent smiles on their faces. Aside from Mag's unforgettable food, watching Amy play with her little orange kitten was also an attraction of the restaurant. Both of them were so cute that they were adorable no matter what they did. Sconard sat nervously across from Vivian. He opened his mouth to say something on several occasions, but refrained from saying anything in the end. Normally, he was very good at smooth-talking the ladies, but those skills had completely deserted him. Vivian was the city lord's daughter, so he didn't dare to run his mouth. Additionally, she was in male clothing, so he wasn't sure if he should converse with her as a man or a woman. Vivian's eyes rested on Amy momentarily before looking away, making it appear as if she didn't really like children. That small detail did not escape Sconard's notice, and he smiled as he said, "Little delinquents really are annoying. I have to discipline a few annoying delinquents almost every day, teaching them how to be good people. She's quite an adorable kid, and she's just disciplining a misbehaving kitten. How does that make her a delinquent?" Vivian pursed her lips as she looked at Sconard, and said, "In any case, shouldn't you learn to be a decent person yourself before you try to teach others?" Sconard was a little annoyed by the mockery in Vivian's words, but he still repressed his vexation, and said, "The kitten is too small to understand anything. If it does something wrong, Shouldn't it be forgiven? Hat, even if little girls make mistakes, they have to be disciplined so they can learn from an early age. Vivian pursed her lips, and didn't say anything further. She didn't want to talk to Skonard anymore. He was just an arrogant rich boy, and not a very smart one at that, so she was not interested in wasting any more words with him. In comparison, the owner of this restaurant was a lot more intriguing. Looks like the insanely spicy level isn't spicy enough. Mag tossed another handful of Tobas Quinn peppers into the wok. He was also very good at educating delinquents like him. Yabimiya placed a medium-sized grilled fish in front of Vivian, and smiled as she said, "Here's your grilled fish, please enjoy." "Thank you." Vivian nodded. Her eyes had been completely drawn to the grilled fish before her. It was about the width of a hand, and was roughly 30 centimeters in length, enough for about 2 people. The rich spicy aroma of the fish wafted toward her, causing her to salivate involuntarily. Gulp. Skonard also swallowed at the sight of Vivian's fish. He was quite skeptical of Mag's prices, but he had to admit that the aroma of the fish was far too alluring. "Here's your insanely spicy grilled fish." Yabimiya soon arrived at their table again with an even larger grilled fish. She placed it in front of Skonard, and a fierce spicy aroma swept toward him. Skonard instinctively closed his eyes. The aroma was making his eyes sting. A ferocious spicy aroma wafted through the air, and all of the customers around Skonard were drawn to his spicy grilled fish. Everyone had seen that an insanely spicy option was available, but no one had ordered it yet. The large grilled fish was over half a meter long, and encompassed almost half the entire table. There was a dense layer of red chili peppers covering the fish, revealing only its head and tail. Just looking at that bed of peppers struck one with the urge to down a glass of ice-cold water, and the aroma wafting from the dish was quite formidable. It was indeed very insane. Mag had suggested that he order the insanely spicy level, and he actually did it. He really was a brave warrior. Everyone was looking forward to seeing his reaction after eating the fish. There was an orc who had a medium spice grilled fish, and his leather belt had snapped in half. Vivian also glanced at Skonard's grilled fish with a hint of surprise in her eyes. Due to her condition, she couldn't eat too much spicy or stimulating foods. As such, she was forced to eat a bland diet at home every day, and she was really craving some actual food. She did want something with flavor, but it was clear that the insanely spicy level was not for her. Her illness was most likely incurable, but she still wanted to live for a few more years. However, if her body could permit it, she actually really did want to try the insanely spicy level grilled fish, just to see exactly how insane it was. Skonard looked at the bright red grilled fish in front of him, and he could barely open his eyes in the face of its insanely spicy aroma. He was suddenly regretting his decision. However, he quickly sensed the admiring gazes from the customers around him, and even Vivian seemed to be paying attention to him. As such, he was immediately reinvigorated, and he whipped his red hair to the side as he put on a nonchalant expression. He picked up his chopsticks, and extracted a morsel of fish meat. Many of the customers in the restaurants had paused to stare at Skonard. Mag had just finished cooking a portion of Yangzhou fried rice, and he also stopped to look at Skonard with a hint of curiosity in his eyes. He also wanted to see what reaction Skonard would have after eating the insanely spicy grilled fish. Vivian had already extended her chopsticks toward her own fish, but she slowly withdrew her hand as she stared at Skonard. She knew that Mag hadn't suggested the insanely spicy level to Skonard because the former was a kind person. Mag appeared to be quite amicable, but he had quite a sharp tongue, and was definitely not some benevolent restaurant owner. Skonard was thoroughly enjoying his time in the spotlight. Even though it was quite awkward that he had failed in his attempt to reserve the entire restaurant, he was now taking a step that no one had taken. In the process, he had also successfully drawn Vivian's attention to him. So what if there are a few more chilies in here than normal? Hat, let me conquer this so-called insanely spicy level. Skonard wore a disdainful expression as he made his declaration, and placed the morsel of fish meat into his mouth. Boom! The spicy juices poured into his mouth, and he felt as if something in his mind had just exploded. He was stunned for several seconds before returning to his senses, upon which his tongue had gone entirely numb. He felt as if he had just taken a sip of molten lava rather than a bite of fish. His mouth was scorching hot yet completely numb, and it felt as if it didn't even belong to him. He couldn't even spit out the fish, as his mouth was unconsciously chewing on. After biting into the fish, its succulent flesh melted in his mouth. Even though his entire mouth had already gone numb, he was somehow still able to clearly taste the sumptuous fish and its crispy skin. Even though the scorching sensation in his mouth wasn't alleviated as a result, the delicious taste distracted him somewhat from his pain. The instant he placed the fish meat into his mouth, his head of red hair completely stood on ends as if he had been electrocuted. His face turned red, then green, and then back to red, making it appear as if he were a human traffic light. The most impressive of all was the fact that smoke was rising from his head like it was a chimney, and it was as if his red hair had been set alight. Wow, a smoking red tiger! That's awesome! Amy's mouth was slightly agape as she clapped her little hands together. Pfft! Vivian immediately burst into laughter upon hearing that. She was simply too adorable. Vivian was completely unable to suppress the urge to hug her. The insanely spicy level really is insane. Look at him, there's smoke rising from his head. His new nickname should be Red Lion. No, you forgot the smoking part. Ha ha ha, Amy is so adorable. I want to abduct her. You'd be sorry if you tried, she's got 2 10th tier magic casters looking out for her. After this ordeal, that guy will probably never want to eat anything spicy ever again. Looks like we have to be careful when we talk to Mag in the future. Otherwise, if he recommends an insanely spicy grilled fish to us, we'll have to finish it even if we cry the entire time. All of the customers burst into laughter upon seeing that. Sconard was the one who had ordered the insanely spicy grilled fish. He was the perfect case study of a flexor who failed. The insanely spicy level is not just adding a bit more chili than usual. Mag looked at the black chili pepper on his chopping board. That was the legendary insane chili pepper. As the name suggested, it was insanely spicy, and was a refined version of Naga Viper pepper that the system had grown in this world. It contained an extremely high level of capsaicin, but after the system's refinements, the damage and stimulation it caused to the body was minimized. However, it was named the insane chili pepper for a reason, so it was impossible for it not to have side effects. It was just that those side effects were all acceptable for the average person. Hopefully, the delinquent will learn how to be a decent person now. Mag turned away with a smile, and continued cooking. Sconard could hear the Vivian and the customers' laughter, and was slightly enraged. He had still underestimated just how spicy the dish would be. However, he didn't have the spare mental capacity to focus on his anger. His chopsticks were flying through the air, shoveling morsels of fish meat into his mouth. His mouth had already become completely numb, and only the delicious fish could slightly alleviate the burning sensation, so he could only eat without pause. The flavor of the fish was simply too exquisite. Sconard had never had such delicious fish in his life, and he simply couldn't and didn't want to stop. As he ate, tears flowed uncontrollably down his face. He basked in pain and pleasure with tears and snot running down his face, and had completely forgotten that he was trying to show his gentlemanly side to Vivian. This is the first time I've ever seen a man cry from eating chili peppers. Vivian cast a disdainful glance at him before having a taste of her own fish. Her eyes immediately lit up as she did so, but her expression then quickly changed as she could feel the strapping around her chest tearing open. Rib. Vivian could clearly hear the sound of her strapping tearing, and her hand that was holding her chopsticks immediately faltered. She looked down, only to see her flat chest inflating like a balloon, and her eyes widened as she hurriedly ducked her chest under the table so no one would notice. Why is this happening? Vivian was in complete shock, and her cheeks were also quite flushed. In order to put on this dashing set of male attire, she had spent a long time wrapping her chest. However, all of her efforts were being undone after taking just her first bite of spicy grilled fish. What could she do? Just what was in this spicy grilled fish? Skonard's head looked as if it were about to explode, and now, her chest strapping had torn open. If she were wearing some loose clothing, then everything would be revealed. This was an indecent dish. She quickly unbuttoned her top, and leaned forward slightly as she sat. The pose was a little awkward, but her clothes were no longer as tight after being unbuttoned, so the new bulge that her chest was creating didn't appear as obvious and noticeable. The sound of the strapping tearing wasn't very loud, and Skonard was completely immersed in his fish, so he didn't notice. None of the other customers were paying attention to her, either. Thus, she heaved a sigh of relief before turning back to her fish with glowing eyes. The spicy juices presented a numbing sensation that she had never experienced before, and it was completely irresistible. The crispy fish skin was enveloped in the juices, and after biting through the skin, she could taste the soft succulent flesh underneath. Even though the fish had been bathing in those spicy juices, the flesh still managed to retain much of its original delicious flavor. All of her taste buds seemed to have been awakened instantaneously, and they were treated to an incredibly tasty feast. This was the most delicious fish that Vivian had had in over 10 years, no other fish dish could compare to it. Furthermore, there really weren't any small fish bones that she had to contend with. Its sumptuous flavor reminded her of the saltwater fish that her father's friend had brought back for them from the ocean. That fish was also very succulent, and didn't have any small annoying bones, either. However, the dish that their chef cooked with it was completely incomparable to this spicy grilled fish. Was 1,600 copper coins for a dish expensive? Even though Vivian felt like the dish was a bit indecent for its ability to cause wardrobe malfunctions, she didn't think it was expensive at all. Such a delicious flavor could no longer be measured using money. Just as Mag had said, the flavor of his dishes more than lived up to their prices. He had said that very confidently, and he had delivered on that promise. Just this dish alone was enough to vindicate Robert's words. This restaurant really could be a major attraction in the Aden Square, or even the entire Chaos City. There was no other restaurant on the Norland continent that could make such delicious food. If even a restaurant like this couldn't make it onto the Aden Square Food Competition Rankings Board, then the food competition shouldn't exist, as it no longer reflected the truth. Vivian held her chopsticks, and prepared to extract a second morsel of fish. Big brother, your chest seems to have expanded. A mellow voice suddenly sounded. Vivian's hand and expression immediately stiffened. Amy had made her way over to Vivian's table without her noticing, and she was currently holding Ugly Duckling in her arms as she stared at Vivian's chest with an adorable expression. Vivian really wanted to dig a hole and bury herself in it. Did she have to be so loud? Erg. Sure enough, many of the customers had their attention drawn to her, and Skonard also looked up, causing Vivian to fly into a panicked frenzy. She immediately adjusted her clothes to further obscure her chest, and squeezed out a smile as she said, "Your eyes must be playing tricks on you, little girl. If you say things without thinking, you'll be taken away by a demon." "That's all right, Father will protect me." Amy wasn't fearful in the slightest as she shook her head. She then stared intently at Vivian's chest for a while before looking up at her nervous face. She shrugged, and said, "All right, I'll take your word for it then." She turned round and departed to continue disciplining Ugly Duckling. "There's nothing there," Vivian emphasized in a serious voice. She didn't know whether she should laugh or cry at the sight of Amy's skeptical expression. Little kids really were still quite difficult for her to deal with, especially when they weren't scared of demons. Thankfully, she didn't insist on throwing up a fuss. Otherwise, things could have turned a lot more awkward. Vivian glared at Skonard with a hint of warning in her eyes. She could tell from Skonard's reaction that he already knew who she was, and was only pretending not to recognize her. Skonard immediately lowered his head, and continued to feast on his grilled fish. He was trying to leave Vivian with a good impression of him, which would hopefully lead to something happening between them, but his efforts had been thwarted repeatedly as soon as he walked into this restaurant. With that in mind, tears began to flow down his face again. It wasn't because he was too distraught, it was simply because the dish was too spicy, and he was unable to control his tear glands. Everyone soon turned their attention away from Vivian after that small episode, leaving her to bask in the enjoyment of dining on her grilled fish. Her appetite had been captivated by the delicious grilled fish, and she didn't have to worry about filtering about any small fish bones, so she was able to eat as quickly as she wanted, and she was completely unable to stop. Beads of sweat began to appear on her forehead, and as she swallowed the grilled fish, a scorching sensation slid down her throat before spreading through her entire body. It was a feeling that was akin to bathing in a hot spring. However, Vivian didn't have the spare mental capacity to assess her body's reaction to the dish, as she was completely focused on enjoying its flavor. At home, she would be able to eat half of a fish of this size at most. However, she felt like she could inhale the entire fish today with ease. Looks like the spicy grilled fish will become very popular in this world as well. However, the rankings board issue is still a problem. The Catering Association has been corrupt for a long time, and that's something that will be difficult to change in a short time. Looks like I'll have to pay the City Lord's castle a visit tomorrow, or get the customers to sign a petition or something like that. Mag thought to himself with furrowed brows. Tonus looked at Warren as the two arrived outside the restaurant. He wore an excited look on his fat face, and rubbed his hands together as he asked, "President, didn't we already remove this restaurant from our rankings board? Why are we still paying it a visit? Should we cause some trouble for the restaurant, and force it to close down?" "Down? No, we're only here to eat today." Warren shook his head. He turned to the perplexed Tonus with a smile, and said, "Robert must have already reported everything to the City Lord. Even though the City Lord is very busy every day, so there's no way he can focus too much attention on a restaurant. Robert worked at the City Lord's castle for many years, and his words would hold more sway than ours. As such, we're here to research this restaurant ourselves so that we'll be prepared if the City Lord ever asks about it. But the City Lord himself won't know anything about this restaurant, so can't we just make something up to placate him?" Tonus was still confused. The City Lord is the master of Chaos City, and one of the smartest people on the Norland continent. Do you really think you can just make something up to fool him? Warren shook his head with a smile as he sighed with emotion. Every time I see the City Lord, I am stunned by his exceptional talents. How could there be a 10th tier knight with such a brilliant mind? I am truly reverent toward him. A reverent expression also appeared on Tonus' face, and he asked, "Then what are we here to do today?" Compared to us, the City Lord will definitely be more inclined to trust Robert. Hence, we must understand more about this restaurant than Robert. We must identify its fatal flaws so we can be prepared for anything. Having a direct altercation with the owner of the restaurant is the dumbest way to do things. As a vice president of the Catering Association, I trust you know what you should be doing, and what you shouldn't be doing." Warren's smile faded, and he glanced at Tonus before striding toward the restaurant's door. Tonus' expression changed slightly as he ducked his head, and he also entered the restaurant. Burp, after devouring an entire spicy grilled fish, including every last strand of cellophane noodles, Vivian burped with contentment. Only then did she notice that her entire body was drenched in sweat. Even her hair was completely wet, and she felt very warm, just as if she had just taken a relaxing bath. The spicy taste in her mouth was slowly receding, but the elated smile lingered on her face. She was a little bloated, but she was in far too much bliss to care. "I'm ready for the bill." Vivian raised her hand. "That'll be 1,600 copper coins, Big Brother Mustache." Amy made her way over to Vivian before extending her little hand. Vivian raised an eyebrow upon hearing that. She did indeed have a mustache glued onto her face, but it was still a strange feeling to have such a nickname assigned to her by this little girl. After all, she was a gorgeous little girl herself. However, her vexation quickly faded at the sight of Amy's adorable expression. As expected, if one was adorable enough, they could do whatever they wanted and not suffer any consequences. Thus, she proceeded to reach for her purse. I'll bait a bill. Skonard immediately stood up, slurring with his numb tongue as he reached for his wallet. I don't need you to pay for me. Here are 16 gold coins. See you next time, little girl. Vivian placed the coins in Amy's outstretched little hand, and harumphed in a tsundere voice at Skonard before leaving the restaurant. Bye-bye, big brother mustache, Amy responded before turning to Skonard, and saying, Smoking Red Lion, do you want to pay your bill as well? That'll be 2,000 copper coins. Smoking Red Lion. Skonard's eyes widened upon hearing that. When had he been given that nickname? He looked at Vivian's departing figure, then down at the half-finished grilled fish before him, his numb tongue and scorching throat begged for more fish. He hesitated momentarily before sitting down, and digging into his meal again. In that instant, nothing was more important to him than his grilled fish. His body's instinctive craving had overcome his logical thinking capacity. In other words, the fish was simply irresistible. Vivian walked out the door, and was immediately greeted by the sight of Warren and Tonus. A hint of surprise appeared on her face as she instinctively lowered her head, even though she was in disguise. After getting out of earshot, she murmured to herself, wasn't that Fatso the president of the Catering Association? Didn't he just remove this restaurant for their rankings board today? Why is he coming here? This restaurant has an exemplary environment, service, and food, all of which deserve 5-star ratings. It's constantly packed to the rafters with customers, and its spicy grilled fish should be placed at number 1 on the ranking board. I have to tell father to stand up for them when I get back. If this restaurant closes down because of the Catering Association, where am I going to find such delicious grilled fish? I'm only doing this for the food though. It's not like this has anything to do with the owner or his daughter. A gust of wind blew past, and Vivian shivered as her clothes were already drenched with sweat. She quickly got onto a horse-drawn carriage, and went back to the city lord's castle. The decor is very good, and there are many customers, but everything is set up in a way that it's not overly crowded. However, there are no racial areas, nor any restrictions on the races of their customers, so that could result in discomfort for some people. There really are many customers here. It's already a full house, and there are still people lining up in droves. Despite that, it's not rowdy in the slightest, and the environment deserves a 5-star rating. As soon as Warren entered the restaurant, he began to formulate his own internal assessment. Yabimiya made her way over to them, and smiled as she greeted, Hi there, we currently have many customers at the moment, so you'll most likely have to wait a while for a meal. No problem. Warren nodded as he sized up Yabimiya with a hint of surprise on his face. Ever since a restaurant had been demolished by a half-dragon waiter a year ago, there were almost no half-breed waiters left in the Aden Square. Who would have thought that there would be a half-dragon waitress here? However, this half-dragon waitress was very bubbly and amicable, and her smile instilled within one a sense of comfort. Even if she were a half-dragon, Warren was willing to give her a 5-star rating. Why is there a half-dragon waitress here? In contrast, Tonus was a lot less tolerant, and he furrowed his brows at the sight of Yabimiya. His voice wasn't very loud, but Yabimiya still heard what he said, and her expression changed slightly as she clenched her fists unconsciously. Right at that moment, Sally made her way over to Yabimiya with a stack of plates in her hands. She looked Tonus in the eye, and asked, Are there any laws in Chaos City stating that half-dragons can't be employed as restaurant waiters? Not using half-breed waiters is an unspoken rule among restaurants in the Aden Square, that's just as applicable as a law. Tonus was a little stunned by Sally's beauty, but he was used to being fawned over by restaurant owners, so he was naturally irked by the fact that a waitress was talking back to him. Many of the customers turned to look at them, and they were a bit surprised to see Warren and Tonus. Warren was the one who released the Aiden Square food competition rankings every month, so everyone was familiar with him. They had just taken Mamie Restaurant off their rankings board today, so what were they here for now? Were they trying to cause trouble? That certainly appeared to be the case, considering how they were picking on a waitress here as soon as they walked in. Sorry, maybe I opened my restaurant too late, so I don't know about any so-called unspoken rules. She is one of the best service staff members in my restaurant, and I believe the law is much more applicable than any unspoken rule under all circumstances. Mag's voice suddenly sounded at that moment, and he appeared with 2 plates of Yangzhou fried rice in his hands. He looked at Warren with a smile, and asked, "Isn't that right, President Warren?" Mag stood behind Sally and Yabimiya with 2 plates of fried rice in his hands, and faced off against Warren. The atmosphere in the restaurant suddenly seemed to have coagulated a little. The removal of Mamie Restaurant from the rankings board had drawn ire from all of its customers, but Boss Mag was most likely the most enraged one. Even though he was still his usual smiling self, and didn't display any negative emotions in front of his customers, one would assume that he was still harboring animosity toward the president of the Catering Association. However, as expected of Mag, he was completely different from other restaurant owners. Under normal circumstances, a restaurant owner would definitely try to curry favor with the president at the expense of his employees so that he could get his restaurant back on the rankings board. However, Mag wasn't doing that. He was going to back his staff until the very end, and it didn't matter to him that he was facing the president of the Catering Association. Is Boss Mag going to have a showdown with them? The same thought appeared in everyone's mind. If Boss Mag was going to stand up for the restaurant, then they were all prepared to back him up. After all, everyone was still fuming about how the restaurant had been removed from the rankings. That's right, the laws of Chaos City take priority above all else. Warren looked at Mag with a fake smile, and his narrow eyes narrowed even further as he replied, "However, unspoken rules have to be respected as well. Regardless of whether you opened your restaurant late or not, you should abide by those rules. That makes sense. After all rules should be respected, but if those rules were made more clear and transparent, they would be more worthy of respect and acknowledgement." Mag looked at Warren, and smile also faded from his face as he said, "President Warren, I'm not sure if you've heard about how Mamie Restaurant was removed from the Aiden Square food competition rankings today. If the true purpose of the rankings board really is to help customers find delicious food, then according to those rules, our restaurant should be very high on the rankings board, so why was it removed for no reason? If possible, I would like a reasonable explanation from you. Your tickets are very expensive, and I bought tens of thousands of them, only for you to disqualify me from the rankings. That's not a very proper thing to do." Mag had seen a portrait of Warren in the documents from the detective agency. Even though the portrait was a little different from the actual person, there was no mistaking his fat face and the mole on his glabella. The one standing behind him was clearly one of his colleagues. Judging from his bulging stomach, he was most likely a high-ranking official in the Catering Association as well. Mag was a little surprised that these two would come to dine at his restaurant after removing him from the rankings just this morning. It was quite easy to deduce that they clearly didn't harbor any good intentions. He was concerned that there would be nowhere for him to press his case, so seeing as these two had arrived on his doorstep, he was going to discuss things with them out in the open. All of the customers present were his witnesses, and this was his home court. All of the customers stirred upon hearing Mag's words. Mag had cut straight to the chase, and wasn't worried about offending anyone at all. However, his words also echoed the confusion and rage in everyone's hearts. They were all waiting for an official explanation from the Catering Association. "What are you trying to say? All of the other restaurants have remained in the rankings board, and yours was the only one that was removed, do you not know why?" Tonus was a little vexed because of Mag's surly demeanor. He was the one who had instigated the incident by questioning Yabimiya's service credentials, but he didn't see Mag as someone that was worthy of as much as second glance. He was enraged by the fact that Mag was airing doubts about the Catering Association's integrity, and he immediately tried to strike back. If our restaurant was removed from the rankings board because 2 of our dishes made it into the top 30, 4 made it into the top 50, and all 5 made it into the top 100, thereby taking too many spots, then I have nothing to say. Mag turned to Tonus with a mocking smile, and retorted, "You must be from the Catering Association as well, right? Even though you don't have a uniform, your figure certainly fits the bill, so you're quite easy to identify." Ha ha ha. I suddenly understand why Amy talks like that. She inherited it from her father. The moral of the story is, don't mess with Boss Mag, or you'll get hurt by his sharp tongue. All of the customers burst into laughter upon hearing Mag's words. They had only seen his friendly and benevolent side, so they didn't think that he could be so savage with his words. You, Tonus' fat cheeks trembled with rage. He was used to having restaurant owners suck up to him, so he didn't know how to respond to such scathing mockery. As the Catering Association of Chaos City, our employees will inevitably have to sample a lot of delicious cuisine as part of their jobs. Only after tasting the food for ourselves can we endorse it to our customers. That is the heart and soul of the Aiden Square Food Competition. After sampling all that delicious food, our bodies have inevitably become like this. I've never been ashamed of my portly figure. I believe it is a manifestation of the responsibility placed on all employees of the Catering Association. It is the heart of the Catering Association. Warren looked at Mag with a serious expression and immediately turned the tables on him, claiming the moral high ground in the process. Mag's eyes gradually lit up as he looked at Warren. In comparison to Tonus, who was useless in a war of words, Warren was a genius. Through his response, he was able to attribute his obesity to a sense of responsibility, instantly turning the tides in their war of words. Mag had rarely ever encountered such a formidable adversary in a war of words in the past. Mag smiled, and said, "Your portly figure may be a manifestation of your heart, but too much fat can cause a series of cardiovascular diseases. When that time comes, you'll indeed be able to feel your heart." Our Catering Association's promise to everyone is that we won't miss out on any delicious food. For that mission, all of the Catering Association's employees, including myself, are willing to do whatever it takes, even if it means sacrificing our health and our lives. A smile also appeared on Warren's face as he said, "The decision to remove your restaurant from the rankings board was made by me. We received many reports and complaints from restaurants and customers alike, so we decided to remove your restaurant in accordance with our rule and regulations. Tonight, Vice President Tonus and I have come here to fulfill our promise of not missing out on any delicious food, so we're here purely to dine. However, it appears that you don't welcome us. I call bullsh*t. Mag chuckled coldly in his heart. It certainly was through no luck that this guy was able to maintain the Aiden Square food competition for so long. All of the barbed insults thrown at him were completely nullified, and Mag was unable to press the issue any further. However, if they had come for a meal, then that was what they were going to get. Of course we welcome you. We welcome all paying customers. Please wait for a moment until some seats open up. I have to get back to the kitchen, so I'll be taking my leave now," Mag said with a smile, and emphasized the words paying customers. He then delivered the 2 plates of fried rice to their designated tables before going back into his kitchen. Where's the young mistress? In the city lord's castle, there was a room with pink decor and pink furniture. Michael was standing in the room, and he was looking at the pile of pillows that had been stuffed under the blankets with a slightly angry expression. A maid stood beside him with a slightly fearful expression, and explained, "The young mistress, she said she wasn't feeling well, so she went to bed, and then... Well, as you can see, master, we don't know where she is, either." The young mistress was always sneaking out like this, and the city lord never pinned the blame on them in the end, but it was difficult to remain calm in the face of his fury. Perhaps the young mistress went out to eat something again. She should be back soon, another maid chimed in. She shared a closer bond with the young mistress, so she knew that Vivian had snuck out for some food. However, what she didn't expect was that the city lord would suddenly return home earlier. He wanted to have a meal with his daughter and wife, thus leading to the current situation. You can go downstairs. I'll wait for her here. The rage on Michael's face receded as he dismissed the two maids. There was a hint of resignation in his eyes. He knew what kind of personality his daughter had. She refused to listen even to him, so how were two maids supposed to keep her in check? Yes. The two maids immediately scurried downstairs as if they had been absolved of a cardinal sin, closing the door behind them as they left. She must be craving some foods again. She's had too much medicine over the years, and there are too many things that she's not allowed to eat. Whom can I go to cure her? Michael sighed as he sat alone in the room. The wrinkles at the corners of his eyes appeared especially pronounced in that moment. The powerful Lord of Chaos City appeared slightly frail and exhausted. Boss is such a good person. Yabimiya stared at Mag's departing figure, and warmth flowed through her heart. With Mag standing beside her, she never had to worry about any doubts directed toward her half-dragon bloodline. He was like an umbrella that shielded her from the rain. Sally took a glance at Yabimiya before making her way to the kitchen with the dishes in her hands. That was also the reason why she was gradually falling in love with this place. She didn't have to worry about any politics or anyone stabbing her in the back. All she had to do was focus on her daily tasks. So he's just going to leave us hanging like this? Tonus looked on as Mag entered the kitchen. He had thought that they would take higher priority, and that Mag would organize them seats at the very least. However, that was not the case, and they were being asked to line up like normal customers. Just imagine yourself as a customer. Perhaps we'll really be able to taste something different today. Warren was quite calm and collected in contrast. He was observing the customers around him, and he could see the blissful expressions on their faces as they enjoyed their meals. Those expressions didn't lie. Back when he'd gone to dine at restaurants with Lori, the latter had taught him how to determine whether a customer was truly enjoying their meal from their facial expressions. That was an important skill in their line of work, as only food that could bring enjoyment to customers was truly delicious food. As such, he was slightly surprised by the expressions on the faces of the restaurant's customers. Never in any restaurant had he seen all customers so immersed in their food that blissful expressions were appearing involuntarily on their faces. Everyone was enjoying the delicious food that they were expecting, that much was apparent from their facial expressions. Warren had thought that it was impossible to see something like this in a restaurant, but it was taking place right before his eyes. Soon, their eyes fell on Sconard, who was eating an absurdly large fish. From the section of the skeleton that had been revealed, they could tell just how large a fish it must have been initially. However, that fish was close to being completely devoured by that young man. What was even more curious was that as he ate, white smoke was rising from his head. All of his clothes appeared to have been drenched with water, and his lips were so swollen and red that they appeared a little purple. Despite that, his chopsticks simply refused to rest, and he panted heavily as he ate. He was also completely immersed in his own world with his grilled fish. What fish is that young man eating? Warren turned to Yabimiya with a curious expression. He had never seen fish cooked that way, and it was also the first time he was seeing a dish that was still being heated even after being served onto the table. Furthermore, that dish wasn't one of the 5 Mamie restaurant dishes on the rankings board, so it was most likely a new dish. That's the spicy grilled fish. He picked the insanely spicy level, Yabimiya explained. Her demeanor had cooled significantly after discovering that they were the president and vice president of the Catering Association. She was furious that their restaurant had been removed from the rankings. Insanely spicy level? How spicy is it? It doesn't look all that spicy to me. Tonus pursed his lips with disdain. I'm not sure exactly how spicy it is myself. You'll know when you taste it, though, Yabimiya said with a smile. Alright, then I'll get an insanely spicy fish. Tonus felt like he was being looked down on by Yabimiya, and immediately tried to prove a point. The spicy grilled fish has small, medium, and large sizes. Which size would you like? Yabimiya asked. Tonus hesitated momentarily before replying, I'll get a medium size. Alright, we'll bring on the food once you two get seated. Yabimiya nodded. If it were another customer, she would remind them that the insanely spicy level was not something an ordinary person could handle. However, she didn't feel like extending that courtesy to such a despicable man. Tonus, when did you start eating spicy food? Warren chuckled. I'm not actually a fan of spicy food, but I feel like this restaurant is merely trying to pull the wool over our eyes. What's this about insanely spicy? I reckon it's all a ruse. Tonus gave an unconcerned smile. That might not be the case. Warren shook his head as he looked at Skonard. However, seeing as that young man was still unwilling to put down his chopsticks despite how spicy his fish was, it had to be quite a delicious dish. After waiting for a long time, Warren and Tonus finally managed to get seats. They were seated next to a big minotaur demon, and Tonus wiped the cold sweat from his forehead. He was feeling immense pressure just from sitting next to the demon. Thankfully, the latter was immersed in a bowl of soft white tofu pudding, and didn't even take a glance at Tonus. Tonus, what do you want to eat aside from the grilled fish? Warren opened the menu. He'd already known the prices in advance, so he wasn't too surprised by what he saw. Tonus hesitated momentarily before a hint of embarrassment appeared on his face, and he replied, I want one of everything. Those guys are really annoying, right? A voice echoed in response. Yes. They're so annoying, Vivian replied instinctively before her expression abruptly stiffened. The oil lamp slowly lit up her room, and she turned with a panicked expression toward the table, where Michael was sitting. Father! Why are you here? Weren't you supposed to be back really late tonight? If I hadn't come back early, I wouldn't have caught you, you greedy little cat. Michael wore a serious expression on his face. He was also feeling quite resigned at the sight of Vivian in male attire. Who told you that? I only went out for some fresh air, I'm not a greedy cat. Burp. Vivian stared up at the ceiling with a blush on her face. She was trying to defend herself, but had burped at a critical juncture to give her away. How embarrassing. Remember to wipe your mouth clean before you come in. Otherwise, I can tell that you went out for food even if you don't burp. Michael couldn't help but burst into laughter as he pointed at the corner of Vivian's lips. Vivian wiped her hand over her lips, and a trail of red oil was left on the back of her hand, upon which her expression became even more awkward. It appeared that she hadn't cleaned her face properly after dining on the grilled fish. She scrambled for an excuse in her mind as she sat across from Michael, pouring herself a glass of water. She tipped her head back, and downed the water in the glass before looking at Michael with a serious expression as she said, Father, I didn't go out just to have a meal today. I was doing some investigating for you. The result of my investigation verifies everything that Uncle Robert said earlier today. The food from that Mamie restaurant really is super delicious, and the restaurant is extremely popular as well. They had a completely full house, but there was still a long line of customers that were willing to wait for seats. The restaurant secured those high rankings in the Aiden Square food competition, only to be stripped off the rankings board. From that, I can deduce that there's definitely something wrong with the Catering Association, so you should launch an investigation against them. Otherwise, the food rankings won't be fair. Oh? You went to that restaurant to do your own investigation? Michael was a little surprised as he looked at Vivian. That's right. I had their spicy grilled fish, and it really was very, very delicious. How about we go with Mother again tomorrow? Vivian nodded with anticipation shimmering in her eyes. I have many things that I have to do tomorrow. At noon, I have to welcome an orc ambassador, and at night, I have to mediate the battle between the demos and the dwarves. I won't have any time. Michael shook his head as he looked at Vivian with a stern expression, and said, also, Master Adams said that in your current condition, you can't eat spicy foods, so this is the last time that you can have the spicy grilled fish. Oh! Vivian pouted at the sight of Michael's stern expression, but she still nodded obediently. Michael's expression softened upon seeing that, and a concerned look appeared on his face as he asked, Are your lower abdomen and feet still cold today? It's time for your appointment with Master Adams again. I came back early today so I could take you over to him. Today, Vivian raised her legs one by one before rubbing her lower abdomen, upon which an elated expression appeared on her face, and she exclaimed, It doesn't hurt at all. And it doesn't feel cold, either, I feel like I'm completely cured. Really? Michael was clearly very skeptical. In a meaningful and heartfelt manner, he said, Vivian, even though Master Adams' treatment process is a little painful, his fire-type magic is the best in the entire Chaos City. Only with him treating you once a month can the frosty energy in your body be suppressed, but Father, it really doesn't hurt anymore. I was still feeling a little uncomfortable when I got up this morning, and nights are usually when I suffer the most, but I don't feel anything now. Could it be because of the spicy grilled fish that I just had? As I was eating it, my entire body felt really warm, and I was drenched with sweat. Now, I feel really good, and all I want is a shower. Vivian cut off Michael's words with an incredulous expression even on her own face. Give me your hand. Michael laid his finger over her wrist to inspect her pulse. He closed his eyes in doing so, and abruptly opened them a short while later with incredulity as he also exclaimed, The frosty energy within your body really has dwindled significantly, especially in your meridians. In fact, there are almost no traces of it left. Father, does that mean I'll be fully cured if I keep eating that spicy grilled fish? Vivian's expression lit up with joy. Compared to drinking foul concoctions every day, eating spicy grilled fish was like rising from the depths of hell right into the embrace of heaven. Come with me to visit Master Adams, and let him assess your condition, Michael urged. Can I take a shower first? Vivian asked. All right, but make it quick. I'll go tell your mother, she still hasn't had dinner yet. Michael nodded, and exited her room. Here are your tofu puddings. Yabimiya was holding a sweet tofu pudding and a savory tofu pudding, both of which she placed on Warren and Tona's table. I heard that the customers of this restaurant are constantly fighting over which flavor is better. What's there to fight about over a bowl of mush like this? Tonas looked at the savory tofu pudding in front of him with a dismissive smile. Let's have a taste to find out. Warren could feel himself salivating at the aroma of the tofu pudding wafting toward him. Back when he had joined the Food Association, it wasn't anywhere near as prominent as the Catering Association of today. The reason he'd joined it was because he really liked to eat, and he wanted to dine at all of the best restaurants in the Aden Square. Now, he could decide what people in the Aden Square ate, and which restaurants could thrive. Never did he think that the Aden Square food competition could change his life so drastically. Warren looked at the tofu pudding in front of him, and found that it was a little like egg pudding, except it was bouncier. He dug into the soft white tofu pudding through the reddish golden syrup, and the two slowly combined. The tofu pudding was enveloped in a layer of glistening syrup as it wobbled in his spoon, giving off the appearance of an intricate work of art. Both its aroma and presentation are exemplary, I hope the taste won't disappoint me. Warren placed the spoonful of tofu pudding in his mouth with an expectant look on his face. The delectable tofu pudding melted almost as soon as it entered his mouth, and the syrup was extremely rich and delightful. Despite that, it was not overpowering, and the faint taste of the tofu pudding was still clearly discernible. This flavor is amazing. Warren couldn't help but gasp with praise. Is it really that good? Tonas also had a taste of his savory tofu pudding after hearing Warren's review, and his eyes immediately lit up. The tofu pudding slid down his tongue, and its delectable flavor instantly combined with the savory juices. The fresh sides went great with tofu pudding. After he swallowed, the faint fragrance lingered in his mouth long after the mouthful of tofu pudding was already gone. What is this stuff made from? How can it be so delicious? There's no way that ordinary soybean could produce such delicious food. It really is amazing. Tonus stared at the tofu pudding in his bowl with wide eyes. The flavor was simply unbelievably delicious. He couldn't help but feed himself another spoonful, followed by another. He was completely unable to stop. He'd been planning to defame and denounce the dish, but forgot all of that. He was completely captivated by the delicious flavor of the tofu pudding. It had been a very long time since he had basked purely in the enjoyment of eating. It was a very special and nostalgic feeling, and he felt like he was back in that past in his younger days. Amy held an ugly duckling in her arms, and she looked at the two feasting old men as she murmured, "The two old fatzos say no, but their bodies are quite honest." Meaningful smiles also appeared on the faces of the customers upon hearing that. They had thought that the two of them would try to criticize the dish, but they had already been conquered by the bowls of tofu pudding. Let them experience the pain of only being able to eat one tofu pudding. Boss Mag's restaurant is perfect, but if there's one thing that I want to give them a negative review on, it's the regulation that restricts each person to only one tofu pudding. Harrison panted as he continued to feast on his spicy grilled fish. At the same time, he was appraising Warren and Tonus with an amused expression. Warren put down his spoon just as Yabimiya was walking past, and he said, "Phew, that was delicious. Get me another sweet tofu pudding. I also want a savory tofu pudding." "No, I want two." Tonus chimed in. Warren turned to Tonus with an earnest expression, and suggested, "Tonus, I feel like you should try the sweet tofu pudding. The sweet syrup perfectly complements the delectable taste of the pudding itself. If you add a savory flavor to it, the effect won't be as good. President, I feel like you should try the savory tofu pudding before you say that. There are pickled vegetables and dried shrimp in it, which perfectly complements the flavor of the tofu pudding. The pudding itself is already a little sweet. I struggle to imagine what it would taste like if syrup were to be added." Tonus shook his head in disagreement. Yabimiya looked at the two debating fatso, and said, "Sorry, but each customer is only allowed one bowl of tofu pudding." "What?" Both of them turned to Yabimiya in unison, and their voices also spiked a few octaves. "Why is there a restriction? It's not like we're not going to pay. I'll just get one bowl of savory tofu pudding, then." Tonus furrowed his brows as he looked at Yabimiya. If it weren't for the fact that they had ordered one of everything, he felt like he could eat 10 bowls of this tofu pudding with ease. "There is demand from the customers, and your restaurant makes tofu pudding, so why won't you sell it to us?" Warren was also quite confused. Yabimiya stood up straight, and adopted a serious expression as she said, "That is a rule of our restaurant. It's written quite clearly on the menu, so we hope you can understand." In contrast with how uneasy she had been, she was slowly becoming more and more confident. The rule had been established by Mag, so there had to be a reason behind it. Warren took a glance at the menu, only to find that there really was such a rule inscribed upon it. A thought suddenly occurred to him then. If Mag were to combine those two into one dish, wouldn't it be able to make it into the top 30 as well? Tonus was about to say something again, but Warren held up a hand to stop him. He looked at Yabimiya with a smile, and said, "All right, then please bring the rest of the dishes." "Sure, please wait a moment." Yabimiya nodded before turning toward the kitchen. "President, we should have kept persisting." Tonus was a little indignant. "What? Keep insisting so we can show everyone how much we love this food, even to the extent that we're even willing to beg for it." Warren looked at Tonus with a stern expression. Tonus' expression abruptly changed upon hearing that. He was suddenly reminded of what they had come to the restaurant to do, and realized that he had been completely thrown off track just by that bowl of delicious tofu pudding. Even though he knew that there was no way this restaurant could make it back onto the rankings board, he still couldn't help but compare the tofu pudding to the other dishes on the rankings. Even if it couldn't claim the top spot, it would at least make it into the top 5. Such delicious food was simply irresistible. Warren was waiting expressionlessly for the next dishes to arrive. No one knew what he was thinking. Mag's rules really are set in stone. He's not even making any exceptions for the president of the Catering Association. I hope they can find it in their hearts to put Mamie Restaurant back onto their rankings board tomorrow. Otherwise, their hearts must be pitch black. I'm not very optimistic about that. After all, they took the restaurant off the rankings today without any prior investigation. All of the customers smiled upon seeing that. Watching the president of the Catering Association falling prey to the rules of the restaurant struck them with a sense of satisfaction. Soon, the young Joe fried rice, rigiamo, and braised chicken and rice were ready. The two of them were completely immersed in the dishes, and their faces were glowing with joy as they ate. Burp, Warren burped with a content expression as he put down the bowl in his hand. He had completely licked it clean. He looked at the spotless bowl for a moment before pushing it toward the center of the table with a slightly awkward expression. It had been many years since he had last felt this way. He had thought that after visiting so many restaurants in the Aden Square, there was nothing in this world that he hadn't tasted. However, as one dish was brought out after another, he was treated to flavors that he had never tasted before. All of the dishes were new experiences to him, and he couldn't help but look forward to the next dish. It was difficult for him to believe that all those incredibly delicious dishes were made by the same chef. The owner really was a genius. If this was 20 years ago, I'd place all this restaurant's dishes in the top 5 of the rankings board without any hesitation. Warren looked at Mag as he prepared dishes in the kitchen, and heaved a forlorn sigh. He was a genius, one that could completely transform the gastronomic industry in the entire Aden Square. It was just a pity that he was born in the wrong generation. Tonus also put down the bowl in his hands, and an expectant look appeared on his face as he said, "That was so delicious. I'm really looking forward to the spicy grilled fish now." Tonus glanced at Warren's stern expression, and he immediately shuddered as he corrected himself. "The food is nothing special. If the spicy grilled fish is of the same standard as all of these other dishes, then this restaurant really is quite ordinary." Then why did you lick your plates clean just then?" All of the customers rolled their eyes upon hearing that. What a shameless bastard! Is he about to start causing trouble now? Are they still not going to allow Mamie Restaurant back onto the rankings board? Some of the customers felt like Tonus' reaction was a little abnormal. "Ah, it's so spicy, but so good. Someone get me a glass of ice water. I feel like I'm about to rise into the sky." Right at that moment, Sconard slammed his chopsticks down onto the table. His lips were completely swollen, making him appear as if he had grown a duck's bill, and he was panting heavily. His clothes were drenched with sweat, and his face was completely flushed. Most of the white smoke wafting from the top of his head had disappeared, but he appeared to be in high spirits. "Sorry, our restaurant doesn't provide ice water." Yabimiya made her way over to him, and she was also quite surprised at the sight of Sconard. He had come in looking like an arrogant, uncouth rich boy, but after finishing the insanely spicy grilled fish, he looked like a dead fish himself. "What? No ice water?" Sconard's voice was a little hoarse. He felt as if his throat were on fire. He had just experienced the horror of having the insanely spicy grilled fish take over his body. It was so spicy that he felt as if he were about to die, but his mouth simply refused to stop. It was as if his body didn't even belong to him anymore, and all he could think about was finishing the grilled fish. That was a very scary feeling. His tongue and mouth were completely numb, and his body was boiling hot. Furthermore, what was a little distressing him was that his stomach was already churning. After consuming close to 10 kilograms of that insanely spicy grilled fish, his shoal was really going to hate him soon. Sconard was feeling a little downcast, and he wanted some ice water to soothe his physical discomfort. Upon hearing Yabimiya's words, he immediately flared with rage, and yelled, "Your grilled fish is way too spicy. And yet you don't supply ice water? What kind of service is this? Sorry, but you were the one who ordered the dish, and you chose the spice level. Our restaurant has never supplied ice water, and we have no plans of starting anytime soon." Yabimiya was a little apologetic, but her demeanor was a lot more resolute as she rejected Skonard's desperate pleas. "Here are 2 dragon coins." Skonard glanced at Yabimiya before slamming 2 dragon coins onto the table, and rushing out of the restaurant. There were still faint wisps of smoke rising from the top of his head. He had come today to pursue Vivian, only to be thoroughly embarrassed in front of her. His digestive system was about to be in a world of pain, but the taste of the grilled fish was absolutely impeccable, so he couldn't do anything aside from suppressing his rage and fleeing from the restaurant. He learned a valuable life lesson that day: chefs were not to be messed with, especially when they were also the owner of the restaurant. Insanely spicy really isn't something normal people can handle. All of the customers who were aware of the context had smiles on their faces. All of them were glad that the arrogant rich boy had been taught a lesson. Being a good person is a difficult skill. I hope he's learned his lesson today. A smile also appeared on Mag's face as he glanced at Tonus and Warren. He sliced up half of an insanely spicy chili pepper, and tossed it into the wok before pouring the vibrant red juices over the grilled fish. You can lie about the other dishes, but some dishes don't allow you to lie, unless you never taste them in the first place, Mag thought to himself as he put down his wok. Tonus looked on at Skonard's figure fleeing frantically with a worried expression before turning to Warren as he said, "President, should we change the spice level? It looks like that insanely spicy level will be a bit difficult to stomach. Here's your spicy grilled fish. Enjoy." As soon as Tonus finished his sentence, Yabimiya placed their spicy grilled fish in front of them. Its spicy aroma immediately swept toward them, and both of them instinctively closed their eyes in unison. How could the spicy aroma be so strong? Surely no amount of chili peppers can create such a powerful scent. Tonus' heart jolted with shock. When he saw Skonard eating the fish earlier, he thought that Skonard was merely exaggerating in his reaction. Only after catching a whiff of the grilled fish did he realize that his level of spiciness wasn't like anything he had ever tasted before. So they grilled the fish, then continued to braise it in spicy juices over a stove. I've never seen this type of cooking method before. Could it be that this is a brand new cooking method that he invented? Warren quickly became accustomed to the spicy aroma, and he stared at the grilled fish before him with a hint of surprise on his face. Mag had already given him too many surprises today. He had tasted all types of dishes in the Aden Square, and encountered many genius chefs, but none of could even hold a candle to Mag. Warren had to admit that Mag was a brilliant genius. I wonder what kind of flavor such a unique cooking method will produce, Warren thought to himself with curiosity in his heart. He enjoyed spicy food, but there was no spicy dish that had ever left a lasting impression on him. Hopefully, this dish would show him something different. No need, we'll stick with this one. Warren picked up his chopsticks, and dug into the succulent flesh of the fish. Yeah, it probably only looks a bit spicy, but isn't actually insanely spicy. Warren had already picked up his chopsticks, so Tonus could only muster up his courage and do the same. After all, he was the one who had ordered the fish, so he had to see this through to the end. Both Warren and Tonus picked up a morsel of fish with their chopsticks before placing it into their mouths. What? How could there be such spicy chili peppers in this world? No. These definitely aren't normal chili peppers. This spicy flavor is so unique and delicious, I feel like all of the sweat glands in my entire body have been opened in an instant. Furthermore, the crispy fish skin and soft succulent flesh perfectly complement the spicy flavor. The spiciness is irresistible, and the sumptuous fish keeps the spiciness just within the consumer's tolerance range. Warren swallowed his first mouthful of fish, and stared at the dish before him with incredulity in his eyes. This feeling is like dancing on a knife edge, where peril and stimulation coexist. This is an addictive feeling. Warren's chopsticks were already reaching for the fish, and he felt as if he had lost control over his hand. It's so spicy, but so delicious. I can't stop. Tona's neatly combed hair immediately stood on ends, and he began to gasp for breath. However, he didn't have the time to smooth down his hair, as he was too busy dining on the grilled fish in front of him. Michael sat in a wooden chair in an intricately crafted wooden cabin. He wore a nervous expression as he looked at the old man with his hand resting on Vivian's shoulder, and he asked, "Master Adams, how is Vivian's condition?" "City Lord, the frosty energy within young mistress's meridians has indeed almost completely disappeared. Even the frosty energy in some of her smaller meridians has receded significantly. I don't know what she did, but it's much more effective than using my fire magic to treat her body. If this type of treatment can continue, there's a chance that all of the frosty energy could be expelled from her body," Adams replied with a surprised expression on his wrinkly face. He then asked, "Could it be that you found a more powerful fire-type magic caster? Or you fed young mistress a fire-type spirit fruit? Is that true, Master Adams?" Michael's eyes immediately lit up with excitement upon hearing that. "Can it really expel all of the frosty energy in my body?" Vivian was also very animated. Her life had been a constant struggle, in which she could never sleep well, and wasn't allowed to eat many of her favorite foods. Living like that was more painful than death to her. "You know that I never lie, City Lord." Adams shook his head with a smile. He then turned to Vivian, and said, "But I really want to know just which master was able to provide such effective treatment. I'm a little embarrassed for wasting your time for so many years when there was a better alternative out there. There is no better fire-type magic caster in Chaos City than you, Master Adams." She didn't eat any high-level spirit fruit, either. Instead, the excitement on Michael's face was replaced by a peculiar expression as he tried to explain the situation. "Grandpa Adams, I didn't eat any spirit fruits or find other magic casters. All I did was eat a spicy grilled fish tonight, and my entire body was drenched with sweat afterward. Then, I went back home, and immediately felt better. The only possibility is that the spicy grilled fish did this," Vivian answered in her father's stead. Ever since she was 10, she had to come to Adams once per month to be treated using his fire magic. If it weren't for the fact that she didn't have much aptitude in the way of magic, she would have probably been taken in as his disciple. Even so, they shared a very close relationship, and she would often come to visit him, even outside of their monthly appointments. "Spicy grilled fish." Adams looked at Vivian with a perplexed expression, and asked, "Why does it sound like some kind of dish? Could it be that that dish was responsible for this?" "It is indeed a dish, and it's a super delicious spicy dish." Vivian nodded vehemently. Her face was glowing with excitement as she confirmed, "Grandpa Adams, does that mean I'll only have to eat a spicy grilled fish a day, and my body will slowly recover? If it really was this spicy grilled fish dish that alleviated the frosty energy in your body, then it shows that the dish is a very effective remedy for you. If you keep eating it every day, it should be able to slowly eradicate the frosty energy in your body. Even if it can't completely cure you, as long as it can rid your meridians of frosty energy, then you'll be able to lead a normal life." Adams smiled, and nodded. "Yay! All I want is to be able to sleep well every night, and live like a normal person. I finally have a chance to make that dream come true. I'm going to eat a grilled fish every day until I'm cured." Vivian was jumping for joy. She had completely relinquished her facade as a cold and aloof young mistress. Her mind was entirely filled with the delicious taste of the grilled fish, as well as the bliss of waking up after a good night's sleep. A smile also appeared on Michael's face at the sight of her elation. He had already forgotten how long it had been since he had seen such a joyful smile on her face. "Father, I feel like it's very necessary for you to stand up for that restaurant. Their food is delicious, and can cure my condition." It's simply not fair that they can't even make it onto the Aiden Square Food Competition Rankings Board. On a horse-drawn carriage that was heading for the City Lord's castle, Vivian was looking at Michael with an indignant expression. "I'll take care of this." Michael was silent for a moment before seemingly making up his mind as he nodded with a firm expression. "All right." Vivian nodded, and said, "Tonight, I also saw the president of the Catering Association go to that restaurant. If he still insists on keeping it off the rankings board even after tasting their food, then he's definitely corrupt. All right, go to bed when we get back. I hope you can sleep well tonight." Michael looked at Vivian with a doting smile. Tonus was regretting his words as soon as they slipped out of his mouth. He had just said that the grilled fish wasn't anything special, and then immediately given himself a figurative slap to the face. A scorching sensation spread through his entire body. He didn't eat much spicy food normally, and he felt as if he had been plunged into a spicy hell. This type of spiciness was unlike anything he had ever tasted before. Coupled with the delicious fish, the dish was taking him back and forth between heaven and hell, and he simply couldn't stop eating. His mouth and tongue no longer belonged to him, and his sweat poured like rain. Despite that, he was struck by a profound sense of satisfaction. Tonus could sense the mocking smiles directed toward him by the customers, but he couldn't be bothered to respond to them. Nothing was more important in that moment than feasting on the grilled fish. They can pretend like the other dishes weren't delicious, but there's no way they can explain themselves now, right? All of the customers wore smiles on their faces as they looked at the two fatsos, who were basking in both pain and pleasure. Only Mag could cook a dish that could evoke such a spectacular reaction. If they have any shred of integrity and humility left, then they would surely reinstate Mamie Restaurant on the rankings board, Mag thought to himself. When it came time to pay the bill, Warren made his way over to Mag with a smile on his face. His clothes were drenched with sweat, and his hair was quite disheveled, but he had a look of approval on his face as he said, "Mag, right? You truly are a culinary genius." Mag smiled, and replied, "You're far too kind, President Warren. I actually hope that I can also be a genius among restaurant owners. Perhaps you'll become one in the future." Warren nodded, and placed some money on the table before departing from the restaurant. "This fish. It's way too spicy." Tonus pointed at his swollen lips before hurriedly departing behind Warren. "What a sly old fox." Mag's eyes narrowed as he returned to the kitchen. Throughout their interaction, Warren hadn't mentioned anything about whether Mamie Restaurant would be reinstated onto the rankings board. At 9 p.m. sharp, Mag began to turn away customers in a euphemistic manner with a smile on his face. He turned off the lights on the advertisement panel outside, and prepared to close for business. Right at that moment, a voice suddenly sounded beside Mag. "Hello, looks like you're closed for the day, but I have request, can you cook a spicy grilled fish for me?" Mag didn't even turn around as he responded, "My apologies, our restaurant is already closed. If you would like a spicy grilled fish, please come back for our lunch service tomorrow." There were many customers who tried to come in even after closing time every day, and he was already used to turning them away. However, the man refused to give up, and continued, "I'm Michael." Mag faltered upon hearing that, and he finally turned around as he replied, "I'm Mag." The man standing before him was very tall and broad. He wore a set of black golden robes, with a black long sword hanging from his waist. He appeared to be about 40 years of age, and evidently kept himself very fit. His eyes shimmered with the sharpness of a brave knight, but also the wisdom of a brilliant tactician, and he gave off an unfathomable air. Michael also faltered upon hearing Mag's reply. That was the first time that he had received such a response after bringing up his name. It appeared that this young man didn't recognize him, nor his name. A smile appeared on his face, and he began to examine Mag with a hint of curiosity in his eyes. He wore a black and white chef's suit and stood as straight as a sword, with a lithe and graceful body. A hint of surprise appeared on his face as he made those observations. Mag's disposition reminded him of a swordsman who was hiding his sharp edges rather than a chef. The sight of him reminded Michael of a young man from many years ago. That young man also reminded him of a sharp sword, but that sword was too sharp and unyielding. In the end, it became the sharpest sword in the world, but was forcibly snapped in half. Michael smiled at Mag, and announced, "Let me introduce myself. I am the Lord of Chaos City." "Oh, my apologies, I didn't recognize you just then." A hint of surprise and apology appeared on Mag's face. He was naturally aware of the city lord's name, but he had thought that this was just an ordinary customer with the same name. Who would have thought that it would actually be the city lord himself? He took a glance at the black horse-drawn carriage parked outside the magic potion shop, as well as a young man in a black jumpsuit inspecting his surroundings with a cautious expression. It appeared that this Michael was indeed the city lord. "That's all right, I'm coming to you as just a customer anyway." Michael shook his head with a smile. He didn't take offense despite the fact that Mag hadn't recognized him. He looked into Mag's eyes, and said, "I wanted to visit your restaurant during your opening hours, but I don't have any time tomorrow, so I decided to come now. Would you be able to cook a grilled fish for me?" Amy was already close to falling asleep with her head resting on the counter. Mag took a glance at her, before shaking his head with an apologetic look. "I would be happy to cook any dish for you, but only during opening hours. Those are our rules, and our service staff have already gone home for the night as well. I also have a young daughter who needs to attend lessons tomorrow morning, so I have to get her ready for bed. As such, I can only apologize, and ask you to come back another day." "So you have a daughter as well? Looks like you're a good father." Michael's brows were initially furrowed with displeasure in the face of Mag's rejection, but that was immediately replaced by a look of approval as he caught sight of Amy. A good father was much more difficult to find than a good chef. He was very rarely rejected in Chaos City, and he didn't think that he would be rejected twice in a row by the same person, even after mentioning the fact that he was the city lord. "I'm not a good father, I just want to be with her as much as I can, and do everything that I can possibly do for her." Mag turned to Amy with a gentle look in his eyes. "I'm actually here as a father to sample your grilled fish. I also have an adorable little daughter. I'm always very busy, and rarely ever have time for her, I owe her a lot. Perhaps the heavens are punishing me for neglecting my daughter, afflicting her with an incurable type of frosty energy. She has been living in constant pain for the past few years, and I'm powerless to help her. Perhaps you can understand the torment that I'm going through." Michael looked at Mag with a sincere expression as he spoke. He paused momentarily before shaking his head with a wry smile. "I've never said those words to anyone. Perhaps I feel like confiding in you as we're both fathers." Mag felt as if he were seeing the city lord through new eyes. The city lord was renowned for being a tough and courageous warrior, but who would have thought that he would have such a gentle and mellow side to him beneath his hard exterior? With that in mind, Mag opened the door to his restaurant, and smiled as he said, "Well, it's a good thing that our grilled fish is not just delicious, but is also great for combating frosty energy. As a father, you can have a grilled fish on the house today. Then I'll take you up on that offer." A smile appeared on Michael's face as he strode into the restaurant. "Boss, who's this?" Yabimiya had just finished cleaning up, and was about to leave when Mag strode in through the door with Michael. As such, she was quite confused as she knew that Mag had never made an exception for anyone when it came to his rules. "That's the city lord." Sally bowed her head slightly after catching sight of Michael. She had seen his portrait once. In order to prevent their young family members from offending powerful characters, her family kept a collection of portraits of the most powerful and prestigious beings on the Norland continent, which they were forced to memorize before stepping out into the world. Mag smiled, and replied, "You two can go home. This is a friend of mine, I'll take care of this myself." "All right, see you tomorrow, then." Yabimiya gave Michael a smile before leaving with Sally. Michael also smiled, and nodded at them in response. His eyes rested on Sally momentarily, and a hint of confusion appeared on his face, but he didn't say anything. "Please have a seat, City Lord. You can choose the spice level of the spicy grilled fish. We have mildly spicy, medium spice, super spicy, and insanely spicy. If you want to sleep well tonight, then I suggest you don't pick the insanely spicy level." Mag closed the blinds as he gave an introduction to his dish. He had made an exception for Michael not because he was the city lord, but because of his words as a father. Being a father himself, he could imagine the despair and frustration that he would feel if Amy were to be afflicted by some kind of incurable condition. Of course, Mag also wanted to have his restaurant reinstated onto the Aden Square Food Competition Rankings Board. He was planning to pay a visit to the City Lord's castle the following day, but seeing as the City Lord had turned up on his doorsteps, it was a perfect opportunity for him. Michael inspected the menu momentarily before placing his order. "Then I'll get a medium-size super spicy grilled fish." "All right, please wait for a moment. I have to tuck in my daughter." Mag nodded before making his way over to the counter. Amy was already sound asleep, as was Ugly Duckling, and he cradled both of them carefully in his arms before slowly going upstairs. "This is the first time I've been left hanging at a restaurant. He is indeed an interesting man." Michael shook his head as he chuckled. He began to look around the restaurant, and his eyes lit up with interest at the sight of the crystal chandelier overhead. "President, what do we do now? It looks like that restaurant really did make it onto the rankings based on actual merit. They have a huge customer base and high prices. If we don't provide a legitimate reason for removing them from the rankings, we'll receive a lot of backlash." On the way back, Tonus turned to Warren with a concerned expression. His lips were still swollen, and he drank another large mouthful of ice water before heaving a long sigh of relief. The grilled fish really was spicy, even the ice water was unable to provide much relief. 20 years ago, I would have ranked the spicy grilled fish, braised chicken and rice, Yangzhou fried rice, rijiamo, and sweet tofu pudding from number 1 to number 5 on the rankings board. Warren shook his head with a smile, and said, "Unfortunately, this is no longer 20 years ago, and the rankings board isn't just controlled by me anymore. Countless customers and restaurants have come together to form a massive net. Even though I'm no longer the one hauling in the net, I still have to look out for some big fish that want to break out of the net. In contrast, if a pretty little fish escapes, I would want to save it, but watching it being eaten by the larger fish is a better option." Tonus hesitated momentarily before suggesting sheepishly, "President, I feel like the savory tofu pudding can be placed at number 6 on the rankings." Warren glanced at Tonus, and shook his head with a smile as he said, "Release the rankings as usual tomorrow, but delay the release of our explanation for removing Mamie Restaurant from the rankings. When a shooting star first appears, it's very dazzling, but it will quickly disappear. All we need to do is watch. There will be many people looking up into the sky, waiting for the arrival of that shooting star." "Oh." Tonus nodded with a contemplative expression. Within an office in the Chamber of Commerce, Mars had his head bowed in a respectful manner, and said to Cyril, "Young Master Cyril, the Catering Association has already confirmed that Mamie Restaurant won't appear on the rankings again. They will assess the rankings that we have specified, and try to get their rankings to match ours as closely as possible." "Very good, Mars, thanks for your hard work." Cyril nodded with contentment. He wrapped his little colorful snake around his wrist, and asked, "How are you doing with Devo and Goudenia's case? Is the Basti prison still unwilling to release them?" "Young Master, that's really not something that we should be meddling in. The two of them have been swept up in a fourth-tier incident, and there's almost no way for anyone to save them. Basti prison is unwilling to reveal any information to us, either, so I suggest we leave this matter untouched. Otherwise, we could get embroiled in the mess as well." Mars shook his head with a serious expression. "So what if we get involved? No one can do anything to our Moraton family in Chaos City anyway. Cyril pursed his lips in a dismissive manner. He looked at Mars, and said, I've already taken their money, so we have to sort this out for them. Otherwise, if our reputation gets ruined, it'll hurt our profits. But Mars tried to reason with Cyril, only to be abruptly cut off. A fourth-tier incident isn't a minor event, right? If I recall correctly, Devo and Gudania were detained in that little restaurant, right? Just make the restaurant the scapegoat. Bail them out, and frame the owner instead. There won't be any issues, then. Cyril smiled as if he were very pleased with his resourcefulness. He stroked his little snake's head before getting up to leave the room. If it were the eldest young master, he definitely wouldn't be so rash and bullish. What a pity, Mars sighed, and shook his head in resignation as he looked down at the files that he had placed onto the table, which remained completely untouched. The Moraton family was indeed a colossus, but the City Lord's castle and Grey Temple were still the main powers in Chaos City. City Lord, what are you doing? Mag had only just come back downstairs when he was greeted by the sight of Michael fiddling around with his chandelier, upon which a peculiar expression appeared on his face. It appeared that the City Lord was perhaps not as cultured as he was rumored to be. Michael had also realized that what he was doing was a little unbecoming of a man of his status, but he still turned to Mag with an inquisitive expression. I'm just curious about the light source in your chandelier. It's not an oil lamp, nor is it a magic crystal. Also, it's emanating a lot of heat, but it hasn't lit on fire, so I was very curious. This is a type of stone that I discovered by chance. It could emit light, so I decided to use it for lighting purposes. It's more convenient than oil lamps. Mag lied like a seasoned veteran. He didn't have a good way to explain electricity to Michael. Furthermore, if Michael asked him to provide electricity for the entire city, then this world would skip the steam era, and advance straight to the electrical era. If that were to happen, the system would probably explode with rage. Michael nodded before getting down from his chair. He turned to Mag, and asked, This is indeed a very peculiar type of stone. Do you have any more of them? Sorry, I only discovered a few of them, and all of them are being used in my restaurant. Mag shook his head with an apologetic smile. What a shame. Michael sat back down in his chair with a wistful expression. Please wait for a moment, the grilled fish will be served soon. Mag hurriedly changed the subject before heading back into his kitchen. Even though he didn't know how Michael had heard about the spicy grilled fish's ability to combat frosty energy, Mag could see that Michael was very fond of Vivian, and was a very good father, so he immediately developed a good impression of Michael. Thus, if the spicy grilled fish was satisfactory to him, Mag would perhaps be able to bring up the issue of the food competition rankings board. In Chaos City, the only person aside from Warren that could influence the Aiden Square food competition rankings was Michael. After all, the Catering Association was a subsidiary to the City Lord's Castle, and even though the association was given a lot of autonomy and freedom, that still didn't change the fact that Michael was the boss of their boss. As such, what Mag had to do now was very simple, he had to conquer Michael's stomach with his delicious food. Michael was staring at the kitchen with a hint of nervousness and anticipation in his eyes. Soon, the delicious aroma of fish wafted out from the kitchen, and he couldn't help but swallow. That smells really good. Due to the changes in Vivian's condition, Michael hadn't eaten yet that night, and his stomach immediately began to rumble as he caught a whiff of the alluring aroma of fish. After waiting for about 15 minutes, Mag emerged from the kitchen with a medium-sized spicy grilled fish, underneath which was an alcohol stove. He placed it gently in front of Michael, and smiled as he said, Here's your spicy grilled fish. Enjoy. Michael only gave an offhand response as his attention had been completely drawn to the grilled fish in front of him. However, he didn't dig in immediately. Instead, he began to carefully examine the dish. In contrast with the grilled fish that was served straight after being roasted on fire, this grilled fish was instead placed into a steel platter. What was even more eye-catching was the dense layers of chili peppers that covered almost the entire fish. Just the sight of it made his throat feel dry and scorching hot. Chili peppers can indeed warm up the consumer's body, but normal chili peppers are ineffective against the frosty energy in Vivian's body. In fact, eating too much of it will instead cause discomfort for her. Could it be that aside from the chili peppers in this dish, there's something else that's able to combat the frosty energy? Michael thought to himself as he picked up his chopsticks, and took his first bite of grilled fish. So spicy! Michael's eyes immediately widened. The spicy juices enveloping the fish immediately erupted in his mouth. These were definitely not ordinary chili peppers. He felt as if countless tiny needles were piercing his taste buds, making his tongue instantly go numb. This numb yet spicy sensation was completely different from what he'd experienced when eating spicy foods in the past. It was a very special and certainly not unpleasant feeling. He bit down through the crispy fish skin, and then into the succulent flesh, upon which an incredibly fresh flavor spilled onto his palate. This was the flavor of saltwater fish. Due to the fact that Vivian was quite fond of fish, he would often order saltwater fish to be delivered to him. However, most of them were dried fish, and only when employing a flying steed could fresh fish be delivered. It was very difficult to keep the fish fresh, and even with his lofty status, he was still only able to dine on fresh saltwater fish once a month at most. After all, he couldn't ask someone to make the trip for him just because he wanted to eat fresh fish. Furthermore, this grilled fish didn't have any small fish bones, and it was even more delicious than the saltwater fish he had tasted in the past. Just having a saltwater fish of such quality transported from the ocean to Chaos City probably cost more than the dish's 1,600 copper coin price tag. He had initially thought that the grilled fish was a little expensive, but he felt like it was well worth the price now. He would be happy to buy a raw fish of this quality at this price, let alone one that had been cooked into such a delectable dish. The spicy flavor erupted in his mouth, and as he swallowed, he could feel a surge of scorching heat flowing down his throat. After entering his stomach, that scorching sensation spread through his entire body, and he felt as if flames were incinerating the excess frosty energy and humidity in his body. All of his sweat glands opened up in unison, and sweat was expelled from within. A cloud of water vapor rose from his body as if he was in a sauna. So this dish really can expel frosty energy. Michael abruptly opened his eyes. Even a normal person like him had so much humidity and frosty energy expelled from his body, so he could imagine the effect that regularly consuming this dish would have on Vivian. He'd initially been skeptical about the dish, but he was a true believer now. The rush of heat wreaked havoc within his body, but it wasn't a painful feeling. Instead, it felt as if he was being bathed in warm water, making for a very comfortable experience. If Vivian can eat this spicy grilled fish every day, then her body should be able to slowly recover. She won't have to undergo the painful magic treatment again, and she won't have to continue suffering from her condition, either. This restaurant, it has to keep operating. Michael looked up at Meg as if were looking at his savior. The despair and powerlessness that he had been burdened with for many years were suddenly lifted from his shoulders. Mag met his sparkling gaze with a smile. From Michael's expression, it appeared that he was very pleased with the spicy grilled fish. In that case, it would be easier for him to bring up the issue about the food competition rankings. There was only one day left, so if he couldn't make it back onto the rankings board tomorrow, then his food competition mission would end in failure. "Boss, get me some rice. This grilled fish is so delicious, it must have some rice to complement it." Michael laughed heartily as he turned to Mag. "All right, please wait for a moment." Mag went back into the kitchen, and quickly re-emerged with a pot of rice. Michael scooped himself a large bowl of rice, and ate it along with the fish as a blissful smile appeared on his face. This flavor was simply irresistible. Throughout the past few years, he had constantly been living under a shadow of self-criticism, unable to forgive himself. After shedding that heavy burden, he felt like he was floating on a cloud, and the meal was all the more enjoyable for it. Mag stood off to the side and looked on in silence. The Lord of Chaos City, one of the men who stood at the pinnacle of the entire Norland continent, was sitting in his restaurant, and eating his grilled fish. There were probably very few people that would believe him even if he tried to tell this story. He was the Lord of Chaos City, but also a father. From his expression, Mag could deduce that the spicy grilled fish would most likely benefit his daughter, and that made him feel quite good about himself as well. I'm a chef, but I feel like a doctor, Mag thought to himself. After eating an entire grilled fish and a large pot of rice, Michael put down his chopsticks and burped with contentment. It had been a long time since he had taken that long to eat a meal. However, the food was simply too delicious to be in a rush. It would be a waste if he hurried through it. Thank you, Mag, thank you for making such delicious and miraculous spicy grilled fish. Michael looked at Mag with a genuine expression of gratitude. You're far too kind, City Lord. It is the duty of us chefs to present good food to our customers, Mag replied with a smile. He was contemplating how he was going to bring up the issue about the Aiden Square food competition without making it seem too abrupt. Thanks for the meal. I still have some things that I need to do tonight, so I'll be taking my leave now. I'll be back to taste your other dishes next time. Before Mag had a chance to say anything, Michael had already gotten up from his chair, and placed a dragon coin along with 6 gold coins onto the table before departing from the restaurant. City Lord, I told you that this grilled fish is on the house. You're not a customer, you're a fellow father. Mag picked up the money, and ran out after him. That's not my payment for the meal, it's just a small gift to you so you can buy some treats for your little girl, Michael responded with a smile before leaving. I didn't even get a chance to talk about the food competition rankings, Mag murmured to himself as he looked at Michael's departing figure. However, it appeared that the City Lord really did have something important to attend to, so he couldn't just ask him to come back. Looks like I'll just have to give up on this mission, then. If I file a report to the City Lord's castle, it'll probably take at least a few days before the matter is brought to Michael's attention. By then, everything will already be too late. Mag sighed, and shook his head in a resigned manner. He had thought that the mission would be simple to complete, but he was stumped at the last hurdle. After closing the door, Mag had a look at the clock, finding that it was already 10 p.m. He went upstairs and brushed his teeth before going to bed. He didn't think too much about the issue. After all, there would surely be more missions in the future, which would provide more opportunities for him to unlock the Häagen-Dazs ice cream recipe. As Michael climbed onto his horse-drawn carriage, he instructed, "Let's go to Robert's Manor first. He and I will go to the City Lord's castle together." Within a brightly lit courtyard in the City Lord's castle, Robert had a stack of documents and bills which were being sorted through by a few employees of the City Lord's castle placed on the table in front of him. Michael stood off to the side with his hands clasped behind his back and a dark expression on his face. Many of the City Lord's castle officials were sitting in the conference chamber with puzzlement on their faces. They didn't know why the City Lord had gathered them so late at night. However, seeing as the City Lord hadn't said anything, no one else said anything, either. Another curious observation was that Robert was also present, and he seemed to be the instigator behind this impromptu meeting. Hadn't he been at the Catering Association for over a year? Was the City Lord going to transfer him back to the City Lord's castle? Or could it be that the things they were going to discuss had something to do with the Catering Association? Many thoughts were running through everyone's minds. Some of them were already feeling quite drowsy, but they forced themselves to keep their eyes open. Robert stood up, and delivered his report. "City Lord, all of the bills have been tallied. They are from the beginning of the year to now, and from them, we have calculated that the Catering Association has made a total profit of 35,600,000 copper coins from selling the food competition rankings, but the balance of their account with Buffett Banks is only 2 million copper coins. After deducting the wages of the association's employees, there are still 30 million missing. 30,000,000 copper coins. How much of that went into their own wallets? The quiet conference chamber immediately erupted. All of the officials were completely dumbfounded. They had always known that there was a certain degree of corruption taking place in the catering association, but they didn't think that it was this bad. They had almost taken all of the money that the association was making. However, now everyone knew why Michael had gathered them today. It appeared that he was preparing to make a move on the catering association. Could it be that Robert was a pawn that had been planted in the catering association from the very beginning? Everyone looked at Robert, and they felt even more reverence for Michael's wisdom and strategic astuteness. Aside from that, the higher UPS of the catering association share a very dubious relationship with some restaurants as well as the Chamber of Commerce. They've been selling rankings for profit for a long time, and have even established prices of each rank. As long as enough money is given, the restaurant would be guaranteed to achieve the ranking that they paid for. Robert picked up a document, and continued, for ranks 50 to 100 on the Aden Square Food Competition Rankings Board, a fee of 10,000 copper coins is taken. For 31 to 50, it increases to 20,000, and for all ranks above 30, an increment of 5,000 copper coins must be paid per rank. For restaurants in the top 10, not only do they have to pay the designated fee, their food has to be of a good standard as well. Thus, from selling rankings alone, the Catering Association can earn around 3 million copper coins per month, but only a small portion of that actually went to the Catering Association. So that means the Catering Association can make 60 million copper coins per year. City Lord, they must be severely punished for this. Detain all of them, and throw them into Basti prison, a heavily bearded military official roared. That's not all. Their income stems directly from the restaurants, so in order to protect their profit margins, they'd have to charge higher prices and cut more corners to save on costs. Their behavior is completely ruining competition in the gastronomic industry. That's so unfair to the restaurants that aren't paying for rankings. What's the point of having an Aden Square food competition if this is what it has become? All of the officials discussed heatedly among one another. This is a classic case of a low-ranking official embezzling a huge sum of money, and it's also why I gathered everyone tonight. Michael finally broke his silence. He looked at all of the officials gathered before him, and continued, if the Aden Square food competition weren't affiliated with our city lord's castle, then it can do once. However, the Catering Association is a subsidiary of our city lord's castle. Even though the agreement we had was that Warren still has full control over the Aden Square food competition, and that a large percentage of earnings is to be paid to him as dividends, he has already broken this contract. What he is doing is fraudulent, and he's able to do this because he has the city lord's castle as his backer. He is extorting customers and businesses, and bringing the entire restaurant industry into disrepute. Hence, I gathered all of you here today so you can work together to control all of the higher UPS from the Catering Association, and then launch an extensive investigation into their shady dealings. Anyone who is related to those dealings must be removed from their position, with no exceptions. Michael placed his hands onto the table in front of him, and leaned forward slightly as he looked into everyone's eyes. Yes, all officials responded in unison with serious expressions. Cleaning up the Catering Association was most likely only the start of a revolution. During the past few years, there had been many officials who abused their power to earn shady income. Many of them paled slightly upon realizing what was about to come upon them, but they didn't dare to show any dissent. Robert will be the leader of this operation, and he has already devised a detailed plan of action. Make sure keep things confidential so the reputation of the city lord's castle remains untarnished, but return the Aden Square food competition rankings to their rightful owners. Make it something that customers can trust, not a money-making tool for dodgy businesses. None of you are allowed to leave the city lord's castle tonight. Michael turned around, and made his way out of the conference chamber as he said, Robert, come with me. Back in his study, Michael looked at Robert with a serious expression, and asked, a complete change of the team will inevitably take place in the catering association. However, how will you ensure that the association doesn't revert back to its ways even after we get rid of the likes of Warren? Everyone changes over time, and the temptation of potential profits will accelerate that transformation. I've seen many instances of similar things happening in the past. City Lord, I think that if we want to completely eradicate corruption in the catering association, the key is to begin a revolution. I've thought about a few approaches that we could take to facilitate this. 1. Diminish the power of those within the catering association by introducing a third-party voting organization. At the same time, we should set up a surveillance organization specifically for the catering association. They won't interfere with the association's work, but they'll be constantly keeping an eye on the association's dealings. With the introduction of those two organizations, I believe we'll be able to completely eliminate the possibility of rankings manipulation. 2. Reintroduce a panel of internal inspectors. This panel should consist of 16 people, who will conduct objective surveys, investigating the restaurants in advance before the rankings are released. Based on their findings, they'll create a preliminary rankings board for internal reference, and if the actual released rankings display a large disparity compared to the preliminary rankings, then something is most likely wrong, and will be alerted to that in real time. 3. Michael nodded with approval after hearing Robert's suggestions, saying, "Robert, after sorting out the matters at the Catering Association, you should come back to the City Lord's castle. There's a suitable position waiting for you here." "City Lord, I still want to stay at the Catering Association. I don't think my grandfather would want to see the food association that he founded be reduced to such a pitiful state. If he could see the current Aden Square food competition, he would be very upset, so I want to stay at the Catering Association and see things through to the very end." Robert shook his head with a firm expression. "All right, then." Michael chuckled in a resigned manner. He patted Robert on the shoulder, and said, "Do what you want to do. I sampled a lot of delicious cuisine under the guidance of Lowry's rankings board, so I hope the next Aden Square food competition won't disappoint me." Michael paused during his departure, and he turned to Robert as he said, "Oh, and that Mamie restaurant. It should be reinstated, and given the rankings that it deserves." The next morning, Mag woke up early as usual to prepare the ingredients for the day. He woke Amy up at 7 a.m., and helped her put on her little magician robes. She had a lesson with Urian today. Amy chewed on some chicken as she asked, "Father, is our restaurant going to return to the food competition rankings board today?" "Well, I'm not sure of that myself. It's rather unlikely, though." Mag shook his head. He had missed his opportunity to bring up the issue with Michael the day before, and he couldn't be bothered to make a trip to the City Lord's castle. Perhaps Warren would suddenly rediscover his conscience after tasting his food and reinstate Mamie restaurant today. Of course, Mag wasn't very optimistic about that. He had ascended to a very high position in his past life, and from that vantage point, he had seen many things. He knew that in Warren's position, there were many things that were already outside of his control. The power of wealth was fueling the catering association, but it had also wrested control from his hands. It could be said that without a powerful third party's interference, whether Mamie restaurant was reinstated onto the rankings board or not would be decided by the Chamber of Commerce. Mag didn't even have to think to know the decision that the Chamber of Commerce would arrive at. From Gudania to Davos, then to all of the restaurants that were crushed by Mamie restaurant on the rankings board, none of them wanted to see Mamie restaurant rise again. Unless the president of the Chamber of Commerce suddenly lost his mind, there was no way that Mamie restaurant would be reinstated onto the rankings board. "They're such bad people. I'm so angry." Amy grumbled as she chewed on a large mouthful of rice. "I'm so angry that I want to have another bowl of rice. If you still want to have tofu pudding later, then you can only have one bowl of rice. You can't eat too much in the morning." Mag couldn't help but burst into laughter at the sight of Amy's adorable expression, but he still turned down her request. "All right. Then I want to have 2 bowls of tofu pudding, 1 sweet and 1 savory. After a brief period of disappointment, Amy quickly extended 2 fingers. She contemplated momentarily before her eyes lit up, and she said, "By the way, Father, wouldn't it be super delicious if you poured the soup for spicy grilled fish onto tofu pudding?" Spicy tofu pudding. Mag raised his eyebrows, and appraised Amy with a hint of surprise on his face. Children really did have the best imagination. In his past life, Mag had tasted spicy tofu pudding in Sichuan, but he still preferred savory tofu pudding. Furthermore, the system had only given him 2 tofu pudding flavor options. Even though there were empty slots reserved for other flavors, no recipe had been given to him for those slots, and he was wary of doing too much experimentation on his own. Exactly. I really want to taste that spicy tofu pudding. I think it would definitely be very delicious. Amy nodded her little head with an expectant look in her eyes. All right, I'll look into it when I find some time. Mag nodded with a smile. His little foodie daughter was getting more and more difficult to satisfy. She was already learning to think outside the box and invent her own dishes. I'm sure Father will be able to make a super delicious spicy tofu pudding, just like the super delicious rainbow fish. Amy nodded with elation as she ate, and she began to tell Mag about the interesting things that had happened at school. After finishing her breakfast, Amy asked, "Father, I've already told Daphne and Ignatzu that they can come over this weekend. Can you cook your delicious grilled fish for them?" "Of course. What about little Jessica?" Mag nodded as he reminded Amy about the clever little loli from the last time. "I haven't seen Jessica in quite a few days. Her mother ate Father's braised chicken already, so she's definitely all better now. If she could help her mother at home, then she wouldn't have to come out to beg anymore." Amy shook her head with a hint of disappointment at not being able to see her friend, but it was quite apparent that she was still quite happy for Jessica. "Then let's go to their house, and invite them to our restaurant with your other friends," Mag suggested with a smile. He could tell that Amy really missed Jessica, and he was also a little concerned about the two, so he decided that it would be best to pay them a visit. "That's a great idea. Father is the best." Amy nodded with a joyful expression. Mag patted Amy's little head with a smile. His mood would always be lifted by the sight of her smile. Not long after that, Yabimiya and Sally also arrived at the restaurant. Mag had a rough idea of what had happened as soon as he saw Yabimiya's gloomy expression. Everything was good about her aside from her inability to hide her emotions. He only had to look at her face to be able to read her like an open book. "Boss, our Mamie restaurant didn't make it onto the rankings board again, but don't be sad, I'm sure the Catering Association will provide us with an explanation." Yabimiya was offering words of consolation to Mag, but tears began to well up in her eyes as she spoke, and she appeared to be the one that had to be consoled. Mag was feeling a little dejected, but he was quite amused at the sight of her pitiable display. He had never seen someone console others in such a unique manner. He hurriedly said, "I'm fine, Mia. You shouldn't be too sad, either. It doesn't matter if we make it onto the rankings board or not, we have so many customers already anyway, so it makes no difference. But we worked so hard, and gave out so many tickets. All of our customers gave us 5-star ratings, and everyone voted so diligently. How could they just remove us from the rankings with no explanation? That's so unfair." Mia pouted as tears swam in her eyes. She had witnessed Mamie Restaurant's steady rise up the rankings board, and was very emotionally invested. As such, the removal of their restaurant from the rankings dealt her a heavy blow. "Don't be sad, big sister Mia. When I become powerful, I'll place our restaurant at the highest position on the rankings board." Amy latched onto Yabimiya's finger with her little hand as a gesture of consolation. Yabimiya nodded, and she seemed to have also realized that she had let her emotions get the better of herself. Mag should have been the most distraught one, but he was being forced to console her. With that in mind, she hurriedly wiped away her tears, and took a deep breath to calm herself down. Do we still keep casting votes today, then? Sally was also in a foul mood, but she was a lot calmer than Yabimiya was. No need. If this is what the rankings board has become, then I don't even want our restaurant to be on it. Mag shook his head with a hint of mockery on his face. There was no point in striving for a rank in such a fraudulent food competition. A young woman in a black dress stood before Geoffrey Moreton with a resolute expression on her face, and announced, "Grandfather, I want to become heir to the Moreton family." Geoffrey lay in his lounge chair in the garden, and habitually narrowed his eyes as he looked at Gloria. Gloria still had a black veil draped over her face, and her fists were clenched tightly, with veins bulging on the backs of her hands. She stood ramrod straight, and her purple eyes pierced through her veil as she looked directly at Geoffrey. Her voice was very firm, and was a manifestation of her determination. They were the only two people in the garden, and the atmosphere was very peaceful yet oppressive. Geoffrey was silent for a long time before finally asking, "What gives you the courage to say something like that to me? Or in other words, what makes you think that I would accept a woman as the heir to the Moreton family?" "My father gave me the courage. He chose to do something he truly loved, and I feel like I must do the same. Just like how he gave up on becoming the heir of the Moreton family 20 years ago, I want to fight for something I believe in." Gloria's voice was very firm, and she clenched her fists tightly. Her voice rose a few octaves as she continued, "Besides, the heir of the Buffett family, Sheer Buffett, is a woman, is she not? If she can become the heir of the Buffett family, then I believe I can also inherit the Moreton family and lead it in the right direction. I think I'll do a better job than my uncle. I'm not an idiot like Ian. Letting a woman inherit my estate is no different from handing it over to someone outside of the family." Geoffrey pursed his lips, and a hint of disdain and mockery appeared on his face. He looked at Gloria, and continued, "I gave him a chance 20 years ago, but he hasn't shown any hint of remorse. You want me to give his daughter something that he abandoned years ago? If it were Mickey, perhaps I would give it some consideration, but you? I can't hand my Moreton family off to a woman who doesn't even dare to show her face to the world. Also, denouncing your competitor behind their back is not a good habit. Grandfather, this has nothing to do with father. In fact, he had no idea about any of this. Besides, you know him better than I do, you should know that he would never regret a decision that he has made." Gloria did not back down. Instead, her voice only became more resolute as she said, "One day, I'll take off my veil, and show everyone what I look like. I don't see this as something shameful, and I don't think I'm inferior to any man. On top of that, I'm not denouncing my competitor, I'm merely stating an objective fact. I will definitely be able to do a better job than he's doing. At the very least, I won't lead the Moreton family to ruin." Geoffrey looked at the young woman before him, and was struck by a sense of nostalgia. He felt as if he could see the young woman in the red dress engaged in a heated argument with him in the conference chamber. Even though their personalities were different, both shared an unyielding nature. Furthermore, Gloria's final sentence was similar to what Sheer had said that day. Both of them were targeting Cyril. With that in mind, Geoffrey sat up a little involuntarily. He stared at Gloria in silence for a while before asking, "So what you're saying is, your goal is to copy that little brat from the Buffett family?" "No, my goal is to surpass her." Gloria shook her head. "Oh." A hint of surprise appeared on Geoffrey's face for the first time. He looked at Gloria with a serious expression, and asked, "So what is your goal?" Gloria's voice was as firm as ever as she replied, "I want to be your successor, and become the president of the Chamber of Commerce." "You sure dare to dream." A smile appeared on Geoffrey's face for the first time as he lay back down on his lounge chair, and continued, "One's goal determines the heights that they will ascend to. If you told me that she was your goal, then I would have been very disappointed, as you would never be able to reach her level because you are constantly looking up to her. I wouldn't hand over my Moreton family to someone who's willing to settle for second." Then, can I become the heir now? A hint of nerves and anticipation crept into Gloria's voice. No, I still haven't decided whether I want to give you this opportunity. You may go now. Geoffrey shook his head, and the smile on his face had already receded. Remember, talk is cheap. Running a business is far more difficult than you can imagine. Even that little brat from the Buffett family took over 10 years to reach her current position, he cautioned in a meaningful tone. I know, but I still believe that I'm up to the task. Gloria nodded without any hint of dejection on her face. Instead, she was slightly elated. This was the first time that her grandfather had ever paid close attention to her. It wasn't approval or even acknowledgement, but it was a step in the right direction. President. The catering. Right at that moment, Mars rushed into the garden, and a hint of surprise appeared on his face at the sight of Gloria. At the same time, he stopped himself from finishing his sentence. You may go now. Geoffrey raised a hand to dismiss Gloria. Yes. Gloria curtsied obediently before departing. After she left, Geoffrey turned to Mars, and asked, What is it? Mars replied urgently, President, we've received news this morning that the City Lord's Castle has made a move against the Catering Association. Warren, the vice presidents, and all of the association's higher UPS have been isolated and controlled. This morning, a group of people from the City Lord's Castle was also sent to the main branch of our Chamber of Conference, and they filed away all of the information regarding our subsidiary restaurants. They're currently verifying all of the documents and past transactions. Has the City Lord finally made a move against the Catering Association? Warren has become too complacent in recent years. He has strayed too far from the right path, so this was only a matter of time. Geoffrey wasn't too surprised to hear such news. He turned to Mars, and said, There should be no problems with our documents. Tell all of our subsidiary restaurants to keep a lid on the situation. The City Lord's Castle has to protect their reputation as well, so they won't make this into a big deal. After a while, things will slowly die down. Mars, why do you seem so flustered about such a minor event? President, there's something that I have to tell you. Last year, ever since young Master Cyril took over the catering department, he expanded our cooperation with the Catering Association. He raised the proportion of reserved Aiden Square food competition rankings from 50% to 90%, and has auctioned off those rankings to the highest bidding restaurants. The documents of those transactions have been stored in our Chamber of Commerce. Mars' forehead was dripping with cold sweat at the sight of Geoffrey's darkening expression. Despite that, he still mustered up his courage, and continued, Also, a while ago, board members Gudania and Devo became involved in one of the Grey Temple's fourth-tier incidents. Young Master Cyril accepted payment from the two businesses, and attempted to bail those two out of Basti prison. Along with the group from the City Lord's Castle, there was also a group of investigators from Basti prison that came to our main branch. President, this is what happened. Almost 20 days ago, Gudania and Mars didn't dare to delay, and immediately gave an account of how Gudania and Devo had attempted to cause trouble for Mamie Restaurant, then gotten involved in a fourth-tier incident due to Devo's ties with his underling, Gabriel. Cyril accepted money from both sides, and tried everything he could to gather information, as well as to bail the two out, thereby leading to the current situation. Geoffrey fell silent for a while after hearing Mars recount. He then looked at Mars with a meaningful expression, and asked, Mars, how long have you served me? 23 years, President. Mars lowered his head as he didn't dare to look into Geoffrey's eyes. Geoffrey then asked, You've been serving me ever since old Jack died. You father and you have served me for several decades, and how have I treated you two in return? Back when father was alive, he would often praise the president. He started as a lowly servant, and has always been grateful to the president for elevating him up the ranks. During the past 23 years, you have treated me like family. Mars lowered his head even further. If that's the case, then why are you so eager to pick a side even when I'm still alive? Remember this, as long as I'm alive, I'm still the leader of the Moreton family and the president of the Chamber of Commerce. Geoffrey smiled with a hint of mockery on his face. Yes. Yes, Mars dug his chin into his chest as he sweated profusely. Even though he had served Geoffrey for over 20 years, every time he saw Geoffrey, he was still reminded of their first encounter, when the president had hurled a torrent of abuse at his father. He was like a powerful lion, he demanded awe and veneration even when he was just resting, and when he rose to his feet to let loose an enraged roar, everyone had to bow their heads. He was the king of this jungle, the jungle known as the Chamber of Commerce. Get that idiot to come and see me. Geoffrey turned his gaze away from Mars as he said in an indifferent voice, from this day forth, do not appear before me again. Among our subsidiary businesses, choose the one that's farthest away from here, and get out. President, Mars' expression changed drastically as he looked up. He wanted to say something, but he swallowed his words in the end. No one could change a decision that Geoffrey had made. Please take care of yourself. Mars bowed deeply before departing with a dejected expression. As he left, he took one last look at the old man standing in the garden, and he suddenly recalled his father's parting words before he passed away, remember, there is only one president in this world, and all you have to do is give him your absolute loyalty. That's all. Father, perhaps I should have listened to you. Mars clenched his fists as he turned to leave with heavy footsteps. He knew that he would most likely never be able to return to this lavish manor, and he felt as if a part of his heart had gone missing. He had seen this manor become more and more prosperous, while the president gradually grew older. The light of the rising sun shone upon the courtyard, but it felt more like the residual light of the sunset, signifying that the end was nigh. If the eldest young master hadn't chosen to become a teacher, this manor would only continue to grow more prosperous. At the very least, it wouldn't fall too quickly, Mars thought to himself, but he quickly smiled, and shook his head. He thought back to how overjoyed the young master had been when he received his employment offer from Chaos School. Perhaps that's the kind of life he wants. Even without all these riches, he's content as long as he's around the children under his tutelage. Father, let me explain. Cyril's face was a little pale as he arrived at the garden. Mars had just told him about what had happened, and also bade farewell to him at the same time. Mars was his father's most trusted subordinate. Even though he only acted as a spokesperson most of the time, he was the one who knew President Geoffrey the best, and he held a special position in the Chamber of Commerce. However, he had been removed, and would never work in the Chamber of Commerce again. He had been banished to one of the Moreton family's subsidiary businesses, and had truly become a fringe character. Cyril wasn't stupid, he knew that Geoffrey was angry, very angry. Slap! Before Cyril had a chance to finish his sentence, Geoffrey turned around, and gave him a vicious slap to the face. The crisp sound of the slap even startled the birds in the garden into silence. Thud! Cyril fell to his knees, and his left cheek was already swelling up as he stared at Geoffrey with shock and horror. He trembled uncontrollably as he said, "Father, I'm sorry, I was wrong, where did you go wrong?" Geoffrey's hands were trembling slightly as he glowered at Geoffrey. He raised his voice a few octaves, and roared, "Tell me what you did wrong." Cyril opened his mouth, but didn't know how to reply. He scrambled for something to say, but drew a blank in the end. "All right, seeing as you're too stupid to know your mistakes, let me tell you where you went wrong." Geoffrey looked down on Cyril with a mocking expression as if he were looking at a jester. "First, you shouldn't have tried to undermine me. Mars and his father served me for several decades. Loyalty is the paramount trait that a servant must possess. From the moment that you forced him to serve you, you earned yourself a disloyal servant. Secondly, you shouldn't have changed my rules. Back then, I established the rule that we can only take 50% of the rankings on the Aiden Square Food Competition Rankings Board. If too many mediocre restaurants can buy their way onto the rankings, then customers will eventually catch on, and protest against the rankings. What have you done? You took 90% of the rankings, and you auctioned them off. You're the second young master of the Moreton family, are you that desperately in need of money? Is money all you can see? Do you know what rules are? Our Moreton family was able to ascend to such heights because of these rules. Even if we established those rules ourselves, we have to abide by and uphold them. Only in a relatively free market can there be sustainable growth. You've killed off all of the freedom in the market, and what's the point of exerting control over a dead market with no potential for growth? Thirdly, you shouldn't have messed with people that you can't afford to mess with. We businessmen appear quite powerful, but we must take extra care if we want to survive in the business world. A true businessman knows fear, and knows how to protect themselves. They know that there are certain things that they absolutely cannot do if they want to ensure their safety. But you went to mess with Bastille prison, and involved yourself in a fourth-tier incident, just for some profit. Do you know what a fourth-tier incident entails? Even if you were the city lord's son, you would be handed a life sentence in Bastille prison if you instigated a fourth-tier incident. Who the hell do you think you are, trying to bail those two out of prison? If you get thrown into prison because of this, I definitely won't be saving you. Father, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. Cyril's face was deathly pale as he crawled forward on his knees in an attempt to wrap his arms around Cyril's leg. Don't think that you can do whatever you want because you're the sole heir to the Moreton family. Geoffrey kicked him away with a disdainful expression, and said coldly, from this day forth, Gloria is one of the candidates to become the heir of the Moreton family. She also has the right to inherit my estate. Those words dealt a heavy blow to Cyril, and he collapsed on the ground as he looked up at Geoffrey with incredulity etched on his face. The main branch of the Catering Association had just been renovated a few years ago, and was a very grand and lavish building. However, the atmosphere within the building was currently quite grave. The employees wearing Catering Association uniforms looked on in confusion and panic as people from the city lord's castle stormed the building. Even though they weren't detained, they had already been prohibited from leaving the building. Warren stood on the second floor, and he seemed to have aged 10 years in the span of one night. Robert stood beside him, and asked, "Did you ever think that this day would come?" "I considered this possibility as far back as 10 years ago, but so many years have passed, and nothing has happened, so I became complacent. Who would have thought that this day would still arrive?" Warren gripped the railing, and looked down at his panicked subordinates. He looked at the Catering Association building, which had been renovated into the exact building that he had envisioned, and a wry smile appeared on his face. Robert was silent for a moment before asking, "Do you regret what you did?" "Why would I?" Warren stood up straight, and spread his arms open in a proud manner as he replied, "Look at this glorious building, look at all these employees, and look at the statues outside the building. I created all of this. Countless customers seek out the restaurants on my Aden Square Food Competition Rankings board every day too, so why would I regret anything? Even without backing from the city lord's castle, I can still achieve all this in 5 years." Robert fell silent again before continuing, "Do you think the old president would approve of a food association like this?" "Perhaps." Warren's expression stiffened as he turned to look at Robert. In that instant, he suddenly felt as if Robert's facial features were a little familiar. He hesitated momentarily before asking, "Who are you?" Robert looked into Warren's eyes, and replied, "The former president, Laurie, was my grandfather. I remember meeting you once when I was still a kid." How is that possible?" Warren stared at Robert with incredulity as if he had heard something extremely absurd. "Back when my grandfather founded the Food Association, my father was not interested in his endeavors, and he didn't allow me to come into contact with it, either. After that, grandfather passed the Food Association on to you, and passed away the following year. Our family never had any ties with the Food Association thereafter, but my grandfather asked me to keep an eye on the Food Association prior to his passing, so I've always been watching it. President, you are indeed a genius. The Catering Association developed and grew faster than anyone could imagine. Even my grandfather couldn't have imagined that the directory he had created to guide people toward good food would become such a powerful organization. However, he definitely wouldn't want to see the Aden Square food competition become what it has become today. The current food competition has completely deviated from his vision, and it's not right. Warren clenched his fists, and replied, "So you came to the Catering Association last year just so you could bring me down today?" "No, that was not my intention. I suggested many times that you should change your ways. I didn't want to have to do this, either. The Food Association is a manifestation of my grandfather's sweat, blood, and tears, but you have also contributed to it just as much as he did. On top of that, you really did lead the Catering Association to greater heights, and put it through a period of rapid growth. Those are all accolades that cannot be taken away from you." Robert shook his head, and his expression gradually became more stern as he looked at Warren. "But you never listened to anything I said. The mantra of our Catering Association, 'Everything for Food,' is carved on the statue outside our Catering Association. Don't you find that ironic? Do you still remember the promises you made to my grandfather? Do you still remember what you set out to do? Do you still remember the promises you made to the city lord's castle? What have you done these past few years? You're plunging the entire Catering Association into an abyss, and my duty is to right your wrongs." Warren looked at Robert's firm expression, and his tightly clenched fists slowly loosened. It was as if all of the energy had escaped from his body, and he used the railing to support himself again. He looked into the distance with a pair of soulless eyes, and felt as if the lavish building around him was on the verge of collapse, as if it could be toppled with a gentle shove. The catering empire that he had invested so many years of his life to build was beginning to crumble in front of his eyes. "To be honest, I didn't want things to become like this, either." A self-deprecating smile appeared on Warren's face. He looked at the statue outside the building, and continued, "In the beginning, I only wanted to build a main branch for the Catering Association, but I didn't have the money. Thus, I thought about how I could earn more money, and selling tickets was a good option. After that, some restaurants tried to bribe me for rankings. I rejected them initially as I didn't want to corrupt the Aden Square food competition. However, I discovered one day that no one would notice anyway. All I had to do was to change one ranking, and I made far more money than I did selling tickets. Part of that could contribute to the association, while I made some profit for myself. I could decide how much I gave, and how much I kept, and the feeling of commanding such wealth was very addictive. After that, the Chamber of Commerce approached me. That President Jeffrey really is a sly old fox, and he really knows the rules. He reserved our rankings in bulk, and even though the money I earned per ranking decreased slightly, it was a safe and symbiotic relationship. After that, Cyril took over the catering department of the Chamber of Commerce, and he was a lot more spendthrift than Jeffrey. However, he was also more ambitious, and took over almost the entire rankings board. I knew the risks involved, but when I saw the crates of dragon coins delivered to my office, I couldn't bear to send them back. Thus, the Aden Square food competition was like a ship that quickly spiraled out of my control. I couldn't control its direction, its speed, or even set any rules anymore. I was still the president of the Catering Association, but I knew that I was just a puppet that was being controlled by money. If they needed me to do something, then all they had to do was to deliver money to my office. I couldn't refuse. I wasn't able to, and I didn't dare to, either. Compared to the Chamber of Commerce, our Catering Association was like a defenseless child. After letting them in through the door, we were completely defenseless. I could only discard my conscience. I refrained from looking at the mantra carved on the statue, and told myself that I deserved all of this. I knew that, what I was doing was wrong, but once the first step was taken, I could no longer go back. Warren sighed as he turned to Robert. He patted Robert's shoulder with an earnest expression, and said, I remember you now. You're the kid who always liked to follow the former president, and didn't want to wipe your mouth after eating grilled beef. If you're going to guide the Catering Association in the right direction, I hope you can let everyone look at the mantra on that statue with a clear conscience. Mamie Restaurant's inability to make it back onto the rankings board was a hot conversation topic among the restaurant's customers. Everyone was initially quite furious, but Mag's positive demeanor blunted their rage. Harrison looked at Mag, and pleaded, Mag, are you really unable to serve the grilled fish in the morning? I had one yesterday, and it's all I could think about for the entire night. Can you please make one for me? The spicy grilled fish is unavailable during our breakfast service. If you want, you can order it for lunch or dinner. The system hadn't actually stipulated that the spicy grilled fish couldn't be served in the morning. However, he wanted to maintain the freshness of the air in the restaurant during the mornings. Furthermore, it was unhealthy to have foods with such strong flavors for breakfast, so it was a health consideration for his customers as well. Mag had responded with a smile, but sounded implacable, so Harrison could only give up. He said, All right, then I'll get a braised chicken and rice. Master Turtle, is my wand ready? Master Halfbeard said it's almost ready, is that true? Amy stood with an expectant look on her face beside Urian, who was dining on a bowl of tofu pudding. It's almost ready. I'll have it finished in 2 days at most. Urian nodded with a benevolent smile as he said, Little Amy, do you want Master to buy you a savory tofu pudding? Yay! I'm finally getting my very own wand. Amy jumped for joy before shaking her head, and replying, No thanks, Master Turtle, I already had some earlier. You only have to pay for me. All right. Urian's expression stiffened upon hearing that. He had promised that he would pay for Amy's meals during her lessons, but it still felt a little strange as he was paying for her in a restaurant that her father owned. A wand that can shrink and expand? Is this the Monkey King's golden staff one they're talking about? Mag thought to himself upon hearing their conversation. Back when Amy had first stated that condition, he had brushed it off as an unreasonable request. However, Krasua and Urian had taken it very seriously, and they were close to completing the actual wand. That was a little surprising to him, and he was looking forward to seeing what the finished product would be like. As the only magic caster on the entire continent that trained in both melee and long-range magic, Amy's first ever wand had been crafted by 2 powerful 10th-tier magic casters, so it was surely something to look forward to even though Amy had only mastered very few spells up to this point. Krasua just so happened to walk into the restaurant then, and he smiled as he said, Arthur will probably arrive from Rodu in the next few days. I heard that there are 2 other little brats coming with him. They'll be perfect test subjects for little Amy's new wand. Amy's eyes lit up as she asked, Master Halfbeard, do you want little Amy to be a bad person? Kind of. In any case, those guys definitely aren't harboring any good intentions, so let's show them how powerful my disciple is, and teach them a lesson. Krasua nodded with a smile, and he sat down before ordering a young Joe fried rice. Urian took a glance at Krasua, and retorted coldly, That's my disciple you're talking about there. Drill that into your head. There's no point in arguing. The entire Norland continent knows that you and I are both instructing the same disciple. Krasua looked at Urian. A cold light was also shimmering in his eye as he said, However, it remains to be seen what kind of magic Amy will use to defeat her opponents. It would be very interesting to see her use melee magic to crush long-range magic. The flames of extreme frost is enough to take care of those small fry. What's so interesting about watching a little girl wielding a large club? Urian chuckled coldly. Master Halfbeard, Master Turtle, are you 2 going to fight? Which one's more powerful between melee and long-range magic? I really want to know. Amy looked at the 2 of them with anticipation shimmering in her eyes. All of the customers in the restaurant also turned to look at them. From their observations, it appeared that the two magic casters had been relatively friendly with each other recently. At the very least, that was the case when they were in the restaurant, so they didn't have to worry about the two magic casters erupting into battle without warning. The feud of fire and ice between the two of them was also widely known among all of the customers. As such, everyone was looking forward to seeing when a decisive result would arise in the feud between their melee and long-range magic as well as fire and ice magic. Of course melee magic is the best. I'll get a sweet tofu pudding. Krasod placed his order as he gave his response. If a magic caster still has to engage in melee combat, then there's no point in learning magic. Thanks for the meal. Urian also presented his opinion, and left some money on the table before departing. Bye-bye, Master Halfbeard. I have to go attend my lesson now. Master Urian told me that he would teach me a new spell today. Amy waved at Krasod before bidding farewell to Mag and the others. She then followed Urian out the door, but she suddenly stopped at the entrance, turning to Ugly Duckling, and said, "Come here, Ugly Duckling, you can come play with Black Coal and Green Pea." Meow. Ugly Duckling backed away cautiously as it looked at Amy, retreating all the way behind the counter. It poked its little head out from around the counter and shook its head with a determined look. "Don't worry, I won't make you fight today." Amy continued to usher Ugly Duckling toward her. Meow. Ugly Duckling still shook its head. "I won't lock you into the birdcage today, either," Amy promised. Meow. Ugly Duckling immediately hid behind the counter, and didn't even dare to poke its head out anymore. "Tch, scaredy cat." Amy shook her head before turning to leave. Only then did Ugly Duckling poke its head out from behind the counter, heaving a sigh of relief. It then climbed onto a stool, and lay onto its back as if settled down for a nap. Mag looked at its portly little stomach, and shook his head with a smile. If things continued like this, it was definitely going to become an obese cat. System, the food competition mission has ended in failure, so give me a new mission. After the breakfast service, Mag carried a lounge chair under the sun, and lay in it in a relaxed manner. He tossed out a handful of moonlight rice, which immediately attracted a bunch of white pigeons. The mission isn't over yet, so the system won't release a new mission. Please try your best to complete the mission, and don't just give up. There is no punishment for failing the mission, but it will negatively impact your mission completion rate, which will, in turn, affect the difficulty of the upcoming missions and the prizes for completing those missions. The system's serious voice sounded. Holy F***ck. Are you kidding me? Mag immediately sprang up from his chair with wide eyes. I'm going to announce something today. In the lavish dining hall of the Moraton Manor, Geoffrey sat before everyone with a grave expression on his face. Mickey had just surreptitiously picked up his fork, but he silently put it down again upon hearing that. He sat up straight, and looked at Geoffrey with awe and veneration in his eyes. Meanwhile, Cyril sat in his seat, and stared at the plate in front of him with soulless eyes as if he was waiting for judgment to be passed upon him. The woman sitting beside him was also slightly pale. She aimed a resentful glance at Gloria, and clenched her hands tightly. In contrast, Herty and Herney both wore gloating smiles on their faces. Usually, when their grandfather delivered an address like this, he was going to scold their uncle's family. This was a common occurrence during the past few years, and it had become an interesting pre-meal activity. They were wondering if it was their uncle that was going to be scolded, or if it was going to be his daughter, Gloria. After all, she had engaged in an argument with their grandfather last time, and was kicked out of the dining hall. Master, Den's Marquis sat beside Geoffrey with a concerned expression on her face. Shush! Geoffrey shot a glance at her, his voice was tinged with an indisputable tone. Den's immediately fell silent, and lowered her head, not daring to speak up again. Lance was sitting nervously in his seat. He didn't know what Geoffrey was going to say, but nothing could change his mind or shake his determination, even if he were to be kicked out of the Moreton manor. Deborah had her eyes downcast, and looked at Gloria with a hint of concern in her eyes. Gloria hadn't suffered any consequences from her argument with Geoffrey last time, so was he finally going to reprimand her for it? Could it be that grandfather is agreeing to my request? Gloria sat in the last row, and stared at Geoffrey from underneath her black veil with anticipation in her purple eyes. She wrung her hands together under the table, also as if she were awaiting judgment to be passed upon her. Tisk, tisk, what's going on today? Why do I get the feeling that a major change is about to take place? There was a hint of curiosity on Aurora's sickly pale face. She looked at the nervous and distraught Cyril, and became even more intrigued. In the end, Geoffrey's gaze fell on Gloria, and he solemnly announced, I hereby announce that Gloria will become a candidate for the heir to the Moreton family, so she now has the same rights as Cyril. Deathly silence followed his announcement. It was so quiet that a pin being dropped could be heard. Cyril's and his wife's faces paled even further, and they looked at each other as their lips trembled. How? How is that possible? Hertie and Herna's mouths both gaped open in shock, and their eyes were filled with incredulity. They turned to look at Gloria, the cowardly little girl who didn't even dare to show her face, and struggled to come to terms with the fact that she was now also a candidate to become the heir just like their father. That meant that Cyril's status as the sole heir now ceased to exist. There was a chance that Gloria could take control over the Moreton family someday. Yes. Gloria clenched her fist with joy, and she almost jumped up with excitement. Mickey and Deborah were also staring at Gloria with disbelief in their eyes. Father, I object to your decision. Right at that moment, Lance rose to his feet, and he looked at Geoffrey with a serious expression as he said, Father, no matter how unhappy with us you are, you have to remember that I was the one who made that decision all those years ago. This has nothing to do with Gloria, so I hope you won't vent your rage against me on her, she's still just a child. I also object, Father. You said that I don't have the right to become heir to the Moreton family as I'm a woman, so why have you made Gloria one of the candidates now? I am your daughter. Why are you picking a little brat over me? What makes her worthy to become the heir to the Moreton family? Aurora also rose to her feet. She was very worked up as she looked at Geoffrey. A hint of color had returned to her pale cheeks, and she balled her bony hands into tight fists as if she were an enraged but malnourished lioness. Do you not know why you are not worthy? Geoffrey glanced at Aurora, and made no effort to hide the disdain in his eyes. Aurora looked into Geoffrey's eyes, and she felt like a maggot that had been exposed to the scorching sun. The courage that she had somehow mustered up had been completely erased, and she lowered her head in fear. She slumped back into her seat before aiming a resentful glance at Gloria. Do you really think I'm the type of person that would vent my rage on my granddaughter? Have I done anything like that in the past 2 decades? Geoffrey turned to Lance with a stern interrogatory expression. No, Lance was silent for a moment before shaking his head. He knew that his father was an extremely proud man. Even after Geoffrey stripped him of his right to become heir to the family, Geoffrey had done nothing else to him, so there was no way that he would harbor ill will toward a child. But Gloria is still only just a child. How would she be able to shoulder such a heavy responsibility? How could she be willing to do something like this? Girls should have their own dreams and pursuits, not be forced to carry such a crushing burden. Lance shook his head again. He didn't understand why Geoffrey had made such a decision. Big sister. Mickey looked at Gloria with a hint of concern in his eyes. Father, this was my own choice. Right at that moment, Gloria stood up, and Lance turned toward her with surprise on his face upon hearing her declaration. She looked him in the eyes, and said earnestly, Father, you told me that everyone, including women, has the right of free choice. I want to become an outstanding businesswoman and the heir to the Moreton family. This is my own choice. Cyril looked up at Gloria with shock and rage burning in his eyes. He had thought that Geoffrey had only made that decision in a fit of rage so he could pressure him by taking away his status as the sole heir. However, it appeared that things weren't that simple. Gloria seemed to have hatched a plot far in advance. Gloria, you have to realize that if you want to become a candidate for the heir to such a large family, you'll be losing a lot of freedom. There will even be many occasions where you will be forced to do things against your will. That's far too unfair to you. Lance looked at Gloria. He was quite happy with her courage, but also a little concerned. Father, making this choice is a type of freedom in itself, is it not? Gloria looked at Lance with a smile. Lance faltered momentarily upon hearing that before a gratified smile appeared on his face, and he nodded as he said, "Indeed it is. I should be respecting your choice, not forcing my ideals upon you." "Thank you, Father." Gloria smiled. "My apologies, Father, and thank you for your decision, as well as your respect for Gloria." Lance extended a grateful salute toward Geoffrey. "From this day forth, the Blue Suede Textiles shop will be under Gloria's management. Maynard will tell you all of the specifics. There is a tall mountain for you to climb if you want to become the heir, and if you can't climb that mountain, then you will be eliminated." Geoffrey ignored Lance as he turned toward Gloria. He then picked up his knife and fork, and sliced into his steak. Upon hearing that, Cyril's dejected expression immediately lit up, and a hint of elation flashed through his eyes. He looked at Gloria, and a mocking sneer appeared on his face. "Looks like Father has no intention of handing over the Moreton family to a woman after all," Cyril thought to himself, and was very relieved. The Blue Suede Textiles shop was the first business that was founded by the Moreton family, and was an old establishment that had been in the Aden Square for several decades. However, the only merit that textile shop had was its sentimental value, and its importance in the history of the Moreton family. It was the most mediocre among all of the Moreton family's countless businesses, and due to lackluster management, it had been making losses for the past 2 years. The only reason why it was still open was because Geoffrey had insisted on keeping it open. Now, Geoffrey was making Gloria manage that textile shop. She was just a little girl who hadn't even been outside the manor much, so how could she possibly reverse that situation? She would most likely waste a few years there to no avail before losing her candidacy to the heirloom. Mickey looked at Gloria with admiration on his face, and he asked quietly, "Big sister, you're so awesome. Are you a boss now?" "SHH, eat first," Gloria replied in a quiet voice, but the joy in her voice was quite apparent. "My little girl has really grown up. To think that she dares to speak like that in front of her grandfather, she's just like her father." Deborah appraised Gloria with a warm smile on her face. "Even though it's a difficult beginning, it's a beginning nonetheless. If she can experience happiness there, then it's a good thing." Lance picked up his knife and fork. He was aware of the situation of the Blue Suede Textiles shop, but he was also very surprised that Geoffrey would make such a decision at all. Regardless of whether she would succeed on her journey, everything would be worth it as long as she was happy. "President, this is the information on the Catering Association and Basti prison incidents, as well as the suggestions offered up by our panel of advisors. Please have a look and make the final decision." Maynard, who had replaced Mars as Geoffrey's secretary, placed 2 documents on the desk in front of Geoffrey. "Read it out to me." Geoffrey leaned back in his chair, and closed his eyes with an exhausted expression. "Yes." Maynard immediately picked up the 2 documents, and read out the 2 series of suggestions. "Do as they say when dealing with the Catering Association. Our Chamber of Commerce and board members cannot take responsibility for that incident. Warren and the vice presidents have already been detained, so they'll have to bear the full brunt of the matter." Geoffrey opened his eyes, and looked at the second document in Maynard's hands as he jeered, "I pay these guys so much, but some of their suggestions are simply absurd. Our Chamber of Commerce is indeed powerful enough to oppose the Basti prison, but they've forgotten that the Grey Temple and the City Lord's Castle stand behind the Basti prison. If we offend those two powerhouses, then there will be no place for us in Chaos City. Then, how should we take care of this matter, President? Maynard asked. Give them all of our files on Devo and Gudania, and fully cooperate with the Basti prison's investigation so we can make up for Cyril's attempts to bail those two out. We have to ensure that our Chamber of Commerce isn't swept up in this matter. As for the money that Cyril took, make him spit it up and return all of it, Jeffrey replied calmly. But the panel of advisors have analyzed that if our Chamber of Commerce is unable to protect our board members, that'll damage our reputation, and could even lead some board members to turn to the Buffett family instead. Maynard was a little concerned. I've never told anyone that the Chamber of Commerce would be a safety net for them, nor do I have any tolerance for those who break rules. People should learn the importance of having fear, and also learn to use rules rather than change them. If that little brat from the Buffett family dares to accept those people, then she's a fool who poses no threat to us. Jeffrey chuckled coldly. Yes. Maynard's expression changed slightly, and he picked up the documents before quickly walking out the door. The Chamber of Commerce had encountered countless challenges and threats, but Jeffrey was always able to overcome them through his unique perspective and way of doing things. That was why it was able to become such a powerful organization on the Norland continent. He was a man who had stood at the pinnacle of the business world in Chaos City, and even on the entire continent, for several decades. I don't want to see the battle between the Moritons and the Buffetts become a struggle between two women in the end. I hope you won't disappoint me again, Cyril. Jeffrey tapped his fingers on his table absent-mindedly as he stared out the window, and fell into deep thought. From this day forth, Robert will be your new president. He will take over from Warren and reform the Catering Association. He will establish a fairer and more transparent new catering association, and the City Lord's Castle will also be heavily involved in the process. A third-party surveillance organization to help our catering association will become a true compass for the foodies of Chaos City. Within the Catering Association's conference hall, a representative official from the City Lord's Castle announced the inauguration of the new president before shaking hands with Robert. Everything for food. I hope all of us can strive toward that collective goal. I hope each and every one of you can feel proud when you look at the mantra on the statue outside. Robert looked at everyone below the stage with an earnest expression. A round of applause erupted, but everyone wore different expressions in response to this sudden change. With Vice President Robert as the new president, it won't be long until our Aiden Square food competition rankings receive the support of the customers again. Rude clenched his fists with excitement. Indeed. Who would have thought that the former president and all of the vice presidents would be arrested in one night? I can finally see hope for our catering association. Arvin nodded in response, and was also very excited. There's going to be a massive revolution, right? Will we lose our jobs as a result? Will we have to share the blame for what the presidents have done? There was a group from the City Lord's Castle that came today, and they took all of our documents. After so many years in the association, who doesn't have some skeletons in their closet? Far more people were panicked and concerned rather than excited. Due to the special nature of this transition, we won't be investigating any average employees, so please do not worry, and focus on doing your jobs, maintaining the normal operation of the Catering Association. I hope everyone can work hard to make the association a better place. Robert soothed the concerns in everyone's hearts before announcing the conclusion of the conference. Did you hear? A massive crackdown happened at the Catering Association today. I saw a bunch of officials from the City Lord's Castle entering and exiting the building this morning, and even the main gate has been locked. I also saw that, but it appears that everything went back to normal in the afternoon. Could it be that even the City Lord's Castle is going to stand up for Mamie Restaurant now? If you ask me, the investigation should have been launched long ago. I've never eaten at any restaurant from the Aiden Square food competition rankings in the past 2 years. Every time I've tried, I've been thoroughly disappointed. Those rankings are completely pointless. The customers lining up outside Mamie restaurant all discussed spiritedly among themselves. Many of them had seen what had happened to the catering association in the morning. Could it be that the city lord really liked my grilled fish last night, so he decided to investigate the catering association? But I didn't get a chance to say anything last night. Mag had also heard the news, and even though he didn't know what had happened, he was still feeling a sense of gloating satisfaction with the ordeal that the catering association had suffered. However, Mag was aware that unless the city lord wanted to tear down and rebuild the catering association, he would most likely only give them a stern warning, and nothing would really change after that. As for whether Mamie restaurant would make it back onto the rankings board or not, he wasn't very optimistic. After all, if a massive reform really were to take place, no one would care enough about Mamie restaurant to reinstate it on the rankings board. Mag wasn't narcissistic enough to believe that the entire world revolved around his restaurant. "Boss, are we having grilled fish tonight?" Yabimiya stood at the entrance to the kitchen, and looked at Mag with anticipation in her eyes. "That's right, we'll have medium spice grilled fish tonight." Mag nodded with a smile. He wanted to try the super spicy grilled fish, but he was worried that Sally would be unable to handle it. In any case, the medium spice flavor was already quite good, so he felt like it was the best option. Why are there so many people lined up here?" Vivian was surprised by the long line waiting outside Mamie restaurant. She had changed into a loose-fitting navy blue shirt today. Last time, the strapping around her chest had ripped open, causing a very awkward situation. In order to avoid suffering the same embarrassment again, she had come well prepared, and she was going to order a super spicy grilled fish. "With so many people in the line, how long will I have to wait? I was the one who alerted father to the quality of this restaurant. All of those fatzos have been detained, but I still have to wait in line?" Vivian was grumbling internally, but before she knew it, she already found herself at the back of the line. She pursed her lips, and thought to herself, so be it. Seeing as their spicy grilled fish is so delicious, I'll line up. Otherwise, I would never be willing to stand behind so many people. She had finally had a good night of sleep the day before, and woke up at 9 a.m. this morning. It was such a wonderful feeling. She had already forgotten how long it had been since she had slept so well and woken up naturally rather than being roused by her pain. All of that could be attributed to the spicy grilled fish that she had eaten the day before. As such, she had changed into male attire, and come to dine on the dish again. However, on this occasion, she had come out through the front door rather than jump over the wall. "No. I can't. I really can't eat it today." Nearby, Sconard shook his head vigorously, but his legs were taking him involuntarily toward Mamie restaurant. Furthermore, his gait was a little peculiar. His two legs were spread quite wide, and he walked like a crab with a reluctant expression on his face. "Stop! Stop right now! If I eat that again today, my shoal really will explode." "No, no, no. The insanely spicy grilled fish is not to be messed with." Sconard forced himself to stop, and a pained expression appeared on his face as he turned to leave. However, he hadn't even taken 2 steps when he turned back around again. He looked up at the restaurant's sign with an enraptured expression, and he was caught momentarily in an internal conflict before gritting his teeth, and joining the line of customers. "Screw it! I'd rather die than not eat such delicious grilled fish today. As long as I don't order the insanely spicy level, I should be okay, right? It's that annoying guy again. Is he stalking me? My father approved of my coming here today, so if that guy tries to blackmail me, I'll teach him a lesson. I haven't touched a sword in many years, but I should be able to take care of a pervert like him with no issue." A hint of disdain appeared Vivian's face as she caught sight of Sconard. She clenched her fists tightly, and prepared to lash out at a moment's notice. Many customers still remembered this rich boy who had tried to reserve the entire restaurant the night prior. He had ordered an insanely spicy grilled fish the day before, and his head smoked like a chimney as he dined on the dish. Looking at his abnormal gait and peculiar expression, they knew that the insanely spicy level was indeed not something to be messed with. Skonard had been quite distracted the entire day. All he could think about was the spicy grilled fish, and as he joined the line, he didn't even notice Vivian. "He's not even taking a single glance at me." Vivian had prepared herself for battle, so she was a little disappointed upon seeing that. However, she certainly wasn't going to pick a fight with Skonard herself. Thus, she was a little bored as she looked around her, and then she discovered a curious phenomenon: why had all the customers split up into two lines? She raised the question to the elderly man that was standing in front of her in the line. "This must be your first time here at Mamie Restaurant, right?" The elderly man was quite benevolent, and he smiled as he replied, "To explain why the customers of the restaurant have split themselves into two lines, I have to tell you about a delicious dish known as tofu pudding." Vivian listened with intrigue as the elderly man recounted how two 10th-tier magic casters had engaged in a fierce battle over a bowl of tofu pudding. Following that was the establishment of the sweet and savory factions, which resulted in the two lines. "Is the tofu pudding really that delicious?" Vivian was a little skeptical. She had actually ordered a tofu pudding the night before, but the fish was too large, so she cancelled the order, and didn't get to taste the tofu pudding. After hearing the elderly man's story, she was getting quite curious about the dish. "Of course. Let me tell you about the savory tofu pudding. It's refreshingly delicious, and can prime your stomach before a good meal. It's an exquisite dish that is not to be missed." The elderly man strongly advocated for the savory tofu pudding. "Don't listen to him. The tofu pudding is sweet, yet not overwhelmingly so, and it's the perfect dessert after a good meal." A middle-aged man from the other line immediately stated his objection. "Then I can just get one of each, and I'll know which one is better after I taste them for myself." Vivian felt like there was an easy solution. "You can if Mag is willing to sell you two." Both of them rolled their eyes in unison, and didn't say anything more. "Humph, it's not like I don't have money, why wouldn't he sell them to me?" Vivian pursed her lips. She wasn't concerned in the slightest. "Welcome." Mag opened the restaurant door with a smile. The newly released strength had increased store profits significantly once again, and he had already saved up enough to purchase a second strength point. Furthermore, it appeared to be time to upgrade the restaurant again as well. System, the expenditure used to purchase strength points can also be used to upgrade the restaurant, right? Mag asked internally. "That's right. As long as the expenditure isn't on purchasing ingredients, you can use it to upgrade the restaurant. What are you waiting for? You can upgrade the restaurant to level 2 for less than 40,000 gold coins. There are so many rights and benefits waiting for you." The system's vehement voice sounded in response, and Mag felt as if it were about to jump out of his head. "Hold on, I still haven't thought about when I want to upgrade. How about we discuss some benefits first? Can you erase the impact on the mission failure rate from the failure of the food competition mission today?" Mag asked. "No." The system's voice was firm and non-negotiable. "Then I won't upgrade the restaurant." Mag's response was just as resolute. The system was furious. "You can't be so shameless. I've always been this shameless." Mag chuckled. "But you have a daughter, and she has a biological mother. You need to set a good example for them," the system retorted. "She does indeed have a mother, but I don't even know what her mother looks like. How about you help me recover my lost memories? At least I'll have a mental image of who I'm trying to set an example for then." Mag continued to chuckle. "The system can't do that." Mag's request met with a firm rejection. "Then I can't do anything. I'll give you some time to reconsider. I feel like the restaurant is quite good as it is, and it doesn't matter whether I upgrade it or not. I'm earning tons of money a day anyway." Mag put on a nonchalant expression. He actually did want to upgrade the restaurant, but it was clear that the system was more desperate, so it would be a waste not to extort it for some benefits. As Harrison walked in, he suggested, "Mag, business is so good for your restaurant, why don't consider an expansion? Aren't all of the shops next to your restaurant empty? If you expand the restaurant, all of the customers will have seats rather than having to wait in a line." I'll consider that." Mag nodded with a smile. He couldn't determine whether an expansion could take place, that decision was down to the system. Otherwise, it would be an issue if there were a disparity in the decor and construction style. All of the customers flooded in through the door, and as Vivian passed by Mag, she couldn't help but take an extra glance at him. His food is so delicious, and it has such miraculous effects. On top of that, he's about 80% as handsome as I am. He is indeed no ordinary man, Vivian thought to herself as she stroked her fake mustache in a narcissistic manner before averting her gaze. Mag had noticed what Vivian was doing, and he raised an eyebrow with a hint of amusement on his face. What an interesting girl. I wonder which family's young mistress she is. Are you all right over there? Mag then noticed Skonard walking in with a peculiar gait, and he extended some words of concern toward him. Of course I'm fine. Skonard forced a nonchalant expression onto his face, and stood up a little straighter. However, in doing so, his buttocks tightened, and his casual facade almost crumbled due to the sharp pain that shot up his rear. However, he refused to be embarrassed again after the humiliation he had suffered the night before. Mag smiled, and asked, "I'm glad to hear that. So would you like another insanely spicy grilled fish today? You're the only one who ordered the insanely spicy grilled fish yesterday. I must laud you for being a true warrior." Skonard swallowed nervously, and as he looked at Mag's smile, he was struck by an urge to punch him in the face. However, his mobility was restricted due to his physical discomfort, and the spicy grilled fish really was too delicious to miss, so he could only suppress his rage. All of the customers also turned toward Skonard upon hearing that. There weren't many people who could draw words of admiration from Mag. Aren't you the smoking red lion? You ate the insanely spicy grilled fish yesterday, that was so awesome. When smoke was rising from your head, you really did look like you were insane. Amy held Ugly Duckling in her arms, and she clapped her little hands with a genuine expression of admiration. Skonard's expression twisted upon hearing that. He didn't know how to respond to this type of praise. However, all of the customers were looking at him, and the half-elf girl was staring at him with reverence, so his ego was instantly inflated once again. A true man dines exclusively on insanely spicy grilled fish. Skonard felt as if he could hear a voice ring out in his mind. That voice set his blood alight, and he clenched his fists as he yelled, "One spicy grilled fish, insanely spicy level. Will your body really be able to handle that? Maybe you should get a mildly spicy grilled fish instead." Mag was a little concerned. "My body is completely fine. I'm as fit as a horse. I want the insanely spicy level." Insanely spicy level. Skonard reaffirmed with an extremely resolute expression. "All right, then." Skonard's determination was clearly unshakable, so Mag didn't try to persuade him any further. He turned to the kitchen, and thought to himself, these young people really aren't to be messed with. Holy F***ck. I ordered the insanely spicy level again. No. If I keep eating like this, I'm going to die. I have to cancel. I have to cancel. Skonard suddenly came to his senses as he looked at Mag's departing figure, and his expression immediately crumbled. "You're so awesome, Big Brother Smoking Red Lion. I can't believe you ordered another insanely spicy grilled fish, you must really be insane, right?" Amy looked up at Skonard, and contemplated momentarily before her eyes lit up as she said, "I'll call you Big Brother Insane Smoking Red Lion from now on. You can call me whatever you want." Skonard looked at Amy with a resigned expression. He suddenly realized why he had ordered an insanely spicy grilled fish against his better judgment. Only a small part of the reason was that Mag had goaded him, the main factor was the praise that he had received from this little girl. She was simply too adorable, and her words of praise inflated his ego significantly, causing him to order the insanely spicy grilled fish again. I hope I can still see the sun rise tomorrow. Skonard sighed internally, and trudged into the restaurant as if he were walking to his execution platform. Vivian sat down in a seat, and turned to Yabimiya as she said, I want a savory tofu pudding, and a super spicy grilled fish. After having the grilled fish, I want a sweet tofu pudding as dessert. Sorry, our tofu pudding is limited to one per customer. Yabimiya shook her head in response. I'll definitely pay for them, even in advance if required, Vivian replied. Sorry, this a rule of the restaurant, each customer can only order one tofu pudding. Yabimiya shook her head again. Then what if I pay double the price? How will I know which one is better if I don't taste them together? Vivian's brows furrowed as she attempted to negotiate with Yabimiya. I'm sorry, this a rule of our restaurant, and we can't make an exception even if you pay double the price. Yabimiya shook her head once again. You see now? Even if you want to taste both flavors, Mag won't sell it to you. Just get a savory tofu pudding. The elderly man from before chuckled as he ate a spoonful of his savory tofu pudding, upon which a blissful expression appeared on his face. *erg. I'm so angry. I don't want to eat here anymore. Vivian was furious, but she looked at Yabimiya's bubbly smile and the delicious scent of tofu pudding and grilled fish in the air, and she couldn't help but salivate profusely. She took a deep breath, and turned to Yabimiya again as she said, All right, then I'll just get a savory tofu pudding and a super spicy grilled fish. All right, your order will be ready soon. Yabimiya nodded with a smile, and turned to leave. Humph, they're lucky that I'm an easygoing person. Otherwise, I'd turn around and, Vivian looked at the spicy grilled fish that had just been placed down on the neighboring table, and she swallowed the rest of her sentence along with the drool that was threatening to overflow. We've really done well today, boss. If things continue like this, we'll be able to save up enough to buy GMOs for the entire winter. 1 bronze wild boar, 2 green-winged snakes, and 1 sawtooth tiger, that's enough for many days' worth of GMO. Outside the restaurant, Mond and Keel looked at SAHDR with excitement on their faces. Both of them had a few small cuts on their faces, but they didn't appear to have suffered any major injuries. The GMO is extraordinarily effective for progression. I feel like I won't have to eat that many GMO before I'll be able to make another breakthrough. Casas, Kalzak, and Marxa were also very animated. Ever since they had tasted the GMO for the first time, the first thought in their mind when they woke up every day was, for GMO. We must fight for GMO. We must complete more missions for GMO. Only through eating more GMO could they become more powerful. This was a path to unprecedented power, and they were extremely excited to have discovered it. Winter is coming soon, and the weather has been colder this year than in the previous years, which suggests that this winter might last longer than usual. We have to prepare more GMO to cope with that. SAHDR shook his head with a grave expression, and said, On top of that, a third group of brothers is expected to join us soon, so we have to make preparations for that. Once the weather starts to get colder, prey will become more and more difficult to find. All of the demons' expressions also became grimmer upon hearing that. SAHDR raised his folding to the sky, and yelled loudly, Let's work hard for our tribe, and for GMO. For GMO, the lava demons yelled in unison, and they were full of vigor once again. These demons are a little adorable. All of the customers looked outside the restaurant upon hearing the commotion, and many of them wore benevolent smiles as they did so. Those lava demons visited the restaurant every day for GMO, and despite their intimidating appearance, they were all gentlemen on the inside. They abided by all of the restaurant's rules, and even helped to maintain order in the restaurant. In order not to affect the dining experience of the other customers, they voluntarily stood outside to eat, and many customers had developed a fondness for them. Rugiamo? Is that what those lava demons are going crazy for? Vivian looked outside with a hint of surprise on her face. She then flipped open her menu again as she was curious to see just what kind of dish his Rugiamo was. No matter what it is, it can't be more delicious than my spicy grilled fish. I could eat that dish every day for the rest of my life. The medium spice was already very satisfying yesterday. I'm really looking forward to tasting the super spicy grilled fish today. Vivian glanced at the kitchen with yearning and anticipation in her eyes. Here is the savory tofu pudding you ordered. Enjoy! Yabimiya emerged from the kitchen with a bowl of savory tofu pudding, and set it down in front of Vivian with a smile. Thank you. Vivian nodded as she turned her attention to the tofu pudding in front of her. Reddish-orange juices had been poured on top of the tofu pudding, along with pickled vegetables, coriander, minced garlic, chopped green onions, and a few drops of sesame seed oil. Steam was still rising from the freshly made tofu pudding, and its delectable scent wafted toward her. Gulp! Vivian couldn't help but swallow. However, she quickly realized that she had lost her composure, and she coughed to hide her embarrassment. She sat up straighter in her chair, and said, I actually only want to eat the spicy grilled fish, but seeing as it's not ready yet, I guess I have no choice but to have this first. Still, I think the spicy grilled fish is the most delicious dish. Yabimiya smiled, but didn't say anything. She found this young man to be quite amusing. He would occasionally ramble to himself, but his personality appeared to be quite good, and he was not an unreasonable person. Vivian picked up her spoon, and gently dug into the tofu pudding. The spoon sliced through the soft tofu pudding as if it were slicing through water, and the reddish-orange juices on top immediately seeped into the incision. As her spoon dug deeper into the tofu pudding, its aroma became even more pronounced, and her eyes lit up with anticipation. Due to her condition, she always had to eat very bland foods, so when she snuck out for meals, she always preferred to find some dishes that were really strong in flavor in order to stimulate her taste buds. However, even though the tofu pudding's aroma wasn't very strong, it still evoked a powerful craving within her. The tofu pudding slid down her tongue, and it melted in her mouth along with the savory juices. The complementary ingredients also contributed to enhancing the flavor, and even after swallowing the mouthful of tofu pudding, its delectable flavor continued to linger in her mouth. It's so delicious. What is this stuff? How could it be so smooth and tender? It's not water, but it melts in my mouth, and I can taste a faint hint of seafood in it. Those dried shrimp are very small, but they're full of flavor. Even the pickled vegetables here are different from any that I've tasted before. The flavor is just right, and complements the tofu pudding to perfection. Vivian stared at the tofu pudding with incredulity on her face. Its flavor was completely different from that of the spicy grilled fish, but it was just as captivating. One mouthful was not enough. She simply couldn't stop after eating the first spoonful. She shoveled one spoonful of tofu pudding after another into her mouth, and a blissful smile appeared on her face as the delicious taste spread over her palate. Spicy grilled fish is the best. But, tofu pudding is also very delicious. Vivian had already completely forgotten what she had said earlier, her mind was completely preoccupied with the tofu pudding. As expected, savory tofu pudding really is the best. The elderly man from before nodded with contentment. He reluctantly placed the last spoonful of tofu pudding into his mouth, and savored it slowly before swallowing it. Even though the flavor was rather ordinary, seeing as the spicy grilled fish isn't ready yet, I'll get another savory tofu pudding. Vivian put down the bowl that she had just licked squeaky clean as she turned to Yabimiya. Even though her expression was quite calm and collected, the tips of her ears were a little red. I'm sorry, I can't. Yabimiya shook her head with a resolute expression.